Hey, what's up, comrades? Hope everyone's doing great. We're here to start season 2 of Highlander, and it's pretty freaking awesome. So we pick up with a new intro. This intro is by a guy we meet later called Joe Dawson. He's one of these Watcher characters we got introduced to in the season finale of season 1. He's a good guy though. He's not like Horton, who's an a-hole. So yeah, so we get the new intro. We actually learn his name immediately because he's in the credits. And it's named. Alright. So then back in Paris, so we're still in Paris, and Duncan is talking to Tess and Richie about how he got an address from this book or from something that Darius had, and it leads to some bookstore back in, like, I thought they said New York, but I think he just said back home. Because they're clearly not. I mean, I think this is filmed in Toronto, right? But I think it's supposed to be Los Angeles, or maybe it's supposed to be New York. I don't know. It's Gotham. So back in Gotham City, there's a bookstore. So they head back and they get all their stuff shipped and everything. And Tessa's kind of mad about the whole situation. She doesn't want to get involved, because this guy like directly threatened her or whatnot. But Duncan needs to like protect his fam, right? Like his wife and his child, which is Richie essentially. And so they head back. Duncan wanders around. He finds this bookstore. I think it's a bookstore where he gets introduced to some guy. He's like, "Hey, I'm not looking for you. I'm looking for your boss." Some kid, because the guy gives him like a funny look. And Duncan's like, "Do you know me?" He's like, "Do I know you?" And the guy's like, And then the proprietor of the institution, Joe Dawson, introduces himself. They talk. Duncan shows him like this book, the Book of the Watchers, and he's like, "I'll buy that from you. It's value. It's got no value." And he's like, "If it's got no value, what do you want it?" And he's like, And Duncan's like very suspicious. And so then the guy finally like reveals that he's a Watcher, that the Watchers have existed for like thousands of years or whatever, that they've just watched the Immortals and just kind of observe what's going on, and that there's like good mortals and bad Immortals, but they would never interfere. That's like point of their thing. They just want to have like a recorded history of like these events, right? Like they're like nerdy historians and whatnot. And then Duncan calls him out on that and is like, "No, somebody tried to kill me. They killed Darius." He's like, "No, no one killed Darius." And it's like, "Yeah, someone did kill Darius. Like one of you people." And it's like, "No, that couldn't happen. Something, something, something." A bit later, Duncan gets jumped in his, like, wherever he's crashing out at, because they're trying to steal this book from him. And so he beats them up and they run off. Let's see. And then I'm trying to see what happens next. Okay, and then we introduced to like the guy who's working for Joe, like the little bookstore guy, and that he's dating some pretty girl. Duncan gets introduced to her as well. This is like Uncle Joe, and like the guy Joe's like best friend is some guy or something. I don't think we get to introduce to who he is exactly. It's got kind of a mystery. Anyway, there's some gala they're going to, Watcher thing or whatever, and Duncan's like, "Cool, sounds good." Then he like heads out. A bit later, the guy from the bookstore and the girl are like on a date, because clearly they're like engaged or something, or they're like seriously dating. And then she's like, "Come to this party with me." And he's like, "Oh, no, I got some work to do, baby." And she's like, "What do you work at a bookstore? What do you mean you got some work to do?" And then he's like, "No, I can't tell you about it. It's a secret. I got to go." And then she gets mad and storms off to the thing. And then Duncan's like chilling. And this guy and a couple other guys like attack him. And he ends up killing one of them, because they're trying to kill him. And then the guy, he almost kills the kid, and he's like, "Get out of here. This doesn't need to happen. This doesn't need to be this way. Tell your stupid boss." And he runs off, and then Duncan's like, "I gotta take care of this." So then he heads to the party where he runs into the girl again, and she's like, he's like, "I need to talk to Joe." And she's like, "Uncle Joe's over here talking to my dad." And they walk over, and the dad is dun dun dun. Hey, remember that guy I told you about from the last season that I was like, "Hey, this guy shows up again." Here he is. It's Horton. Horton hears the Hugh, and he's there. They like hard handshake each other, and then they like start jibber jabbing and threatening each other, and then at some point he says something really like mean to Darius, and Duncan like slaps the crap out of him. I got a kid in my car if you can't tell. So just listening to some audiobook, and I'm not cursing like I normally do. So anyway, he and then the girl gets super concerned, and then she's like, "What'd you do that for?" And she's like, "Ask your," and he's like, "Ask your dad," and she's like, "He won't tell me either." Oh goodness. So Duncan like storms out of there. We get a shot of like Tessa and Richie, and they're just like hiding out somewhere, but she's getting sick and tired of it, right? Because she needs to be protected, because they're like going after them as well. And Joe and the Horton guy have like an argument, and Horton kind of reveals it's so then Duncan approaches Joe at a different time, and they have like an argument about Horton being the one who's like hunting him, and he's like, "No, that couldn't be. We wouldn't do that." And he's like, "Yes, he's the one who killed Darius. He was in Paris." And he's like, "No, he was in Germany." It's like, "Check his passport." And I'm like, how is he supposed to do that, Duncan? Stop being so irrational. You're like 400 years old. It's very emotional. Maybe that's part of being an immortal. Anyway, so then we get some more. Oh, okay. So then the boy comes up and meets with Horton in his like fancy apartment up on like the top floor, like the penthouse. And then they're talking about what's going on. And then the boy's like, I don't want to do this anymore. I disagree with you. I want to be with Joe. I think we can, we just need to watch the Immortals. I don't think they're all dangerous. Like Duncan seems all right. And the guy's like, I see. That's good. I'm glad you're like challenging your elders or whatever. And then he like pushes him off to his death from this area. And he's like, that's right. I'm super evil. Oh, goodness. Anyway, so okay, so he runs up. Oh, yeah, he kills that guy. Okay, so then he's comforting his daughter and being like, I don't know, maybe he was drunk after the party. Like, he showed up late and yada, yada, yada. Like, I don't know what could possibly be going on. Meanwhile, Duncan... like I said, Duncan and Joe have a conversation, and then Duncan calls this guy while they're mid-conversation, and the guy's like, meet me at this warehouse at this time, and Duncan hangs up the phone, and the daughter's over is like listening in. So then the guy shows up, and he's setting up his like plan to ambush and kill Duncan when Joe pops out of the shadows, and he's like, so this is what we're doing now. And the guy's like, what are you doing here? And he's like, this is not our way. And he's like, that's not your way, but it is my way, those people. And he's like, they're not all bad. And it's like, it doesn't matter, they want to dominate us. And they have like a back and forth about that. Meanwhile, for like the third episode in a row, if you count the last two episodes of season one, Duncan MacLeod is solid snaking his way through like all this guy's minions, and like he's like cleaning everything up. Like it's like, like I said, it's like one of these like immersive sims or like one of these like stealth action games or whatever, where he's just like, even like a Far Cry, right? Like he's just like, okay, here's the warehouse. There's a guy out there. I'm gonna knock him out. Then I'm gonna move to the next guy. Knock him out. All right, everyone's knocked out but the main guy. Time to go in. And then he rolls in, and the guy's like, I will kill you. And he pulls out a gun and like fires and misses, and then him and Duncan like yell at each other, and then the girl shows up and she's like, no, Daddy, what are you doing? You can't be killing people. That's ridiculous. And he's like, get out of here, you dumb bint. And then he doesn't say it like that. And so the Duncan and him like kind of fight. Duncan like knocks him down, and he gets him like they kind of wrestle, and then he gets the guy to a point where he could just like stab him real easy and kill him. And then the girl's like screaming, and Joe's like, this is not your way. And finally Duncan's like, fuck you guys, fine, you're right. And so he turns to like walk away, and then the guy pulls a fucking gun out and shoots him a couple times. And Duncan's like, the fuck. And so he turns around, and he takes those shots like a champ, and he like rolls up to the guy and knocks the gun out of his hand and then stabs him. Yeah, I think he knocks the gun out of his hand first. No, he knocked the gun out of him before. So this time he just like stabs the guy because he's like all shot up and he doesn't want to die. And then the girl's like, no, how could you? How could you? And I'm like, you are a dumb bitch. Like, the fuck are you talking about? This dude, I don't know. It does not seem like she understands about the whole immortal thing. But she's like, why? And she's like looking right at Duncan. I'm like, this is probably poorly acted, I would say, because like, why did this have to happen? Make sense? Or like, why, Daddy? Right? But it's like, motherfucker, this dude was shooting this guy to kill him, and so the guy like defended himself. Like, Duncan did no wrong. Anyway, and then Duncan wakes up a little bit later, and everybody's gone. He picks up his sword and he like stumbles over to this computer, and he types in like his name and the name of somebody else, and there's like no record of it. He's like, all right, good. These watchers are gonna leave me the fuck alone finally. And then he like meanders on out of there. A bit later, him and Tessa are walking with Richie, and they're like the cute little family they are, and they're talking about like mom, dad, and son. Like, this is an anime. Richie would be like a short blonde haired guy who's clearly a teenager, right? Like 100%. Which he is. He's like a teenager. I think he's supposed to be 18, 19. I'm sorry. And then, man, this sickness is killing me. What was I saying? Oh, yeah. So then, and they make some comment about not being followed anymore, and Duncan's like, I wouldn't count on it. And then we see this like creepy dude who's like holding hands with this woman, and he turns around like very like evilly and like stares at Duncan as he's walking away, and then the camera pans down, and he's got the Watcher tattoo on his wrist, and it's like, dun dun dun, we're not done with these motherfuckers. Episode 2 picks up with these guys on motorcycles by like the docks, and they're doing some shady stuff. They're like trying to jump over from like one pier to the next or something. Anyway, the first guy goes, he makes it. The second guy goes, he falls in the water, and then the first guy is like kind of taunting him and asking him what it's like to die. Like, okay, creep. He finally pulls the guy out, and the guy gets like super mad, and then the first guy is just like whatever and wanders off. We hit moving ahead, we see Duncan bringing Richie and Tessa to like a photo art gallery, which I'm not a big fan of photo art, to be completely honest. especially photo art tends to be like this weird, like artsy, like black and white stuff. Yeah, if you're taking photos of like beautiful, like landscapes and stuff, I'm game for that. Or like, sexy chicks. But outside of that, it's kind of like, meh, not my thing. Anyway, it's not Richie's thing either. He's talking about going to some sort of like, I don't know, rally cross or something. I know he's complaining about something. But they start looking around. Tessa mentions that some of the photos are very morbid. And Duncan's like, that's interesting. But the reason he brought him here is because his friend is part of this like exhibit. Garrick, I think is his name. They meet the guy, and hey, it's the motorcycle guy from the beginning. Cool. And then he notices, well, they're just like chit-chatting and whatnot, and he says some like kind of oddball stuff that Tessa's like, okie dokie, I'm going to go wander over here. And so then Richie runs up and he's like, hey, is this yours, man? And he shows him a photograph, and then Duncan has like a recall to like past events. And the past events are, there was like a kid who was in a fire back in like, I don't know, old-timey Chicago or something. And so he runs in to like save the kid and comes out, and then there's like this investigative reporter / like, ambulance chaser, and she's like trying to take photos of what's going on and trying to get information from Duncan about why he ran into the fire and what he was thinking and all that stuff. And so he's like, you could do better, something, maybe you should spend more time taking photos of things that actually matter and stop trying to be like an ambulance chaser. And this apparently changed her life, because when we get back to the present, we see her. She's an old woman, and this is her art gallery, and she's the one who did all these photos, and she's dying of Alzheimer's dementia or some sort. It seems like she has some sort of dementia going on. And Duncan kind of like tries to avoid her because he was like, this chick was like one of his like past lovers or whatever. And, if you're like in the 1930s or whatever, now she's like, I don't know, 80 years old, 90 years old, right? And so he kind of like dodges around the thing, but chat with her. And then her like caregiver like comes over. And then Tessa's like, what's going on with that? And do you know her? And he's like, yes, I do, in fact, know her. And they chat about that a little bit. And then Garrick reveals that she's like dying and that she doesn't have that too much longer to live. And that, and then he says more like oddball stuff about not caring about mortals and stuff. Right. Duncan goes to go check on her. And then, Tessa leaves, and then Garrick and Richie end up like hanging out. They're like chit-chatting about stuff, and then Richie goes to hang out with Garrick like secretly because Dad doesn't want him to, obviously. Or Mom doesn't want him to hang out with, obviously. And so he sneaks back over there, and then, they like motorcycle a little bit, and the guy is still being super creepball. He like almost runs into Richie with a motorcycle, and is like, what did that feel like? I want to know. And it's like, dude, why are you such a creep? How about you just chill for a second? And then finally he's like challenges Richie to like ride a bike, and so they head out to ride bikes. And so then Garrick challenges Richie to like want to live a little or something. And so then they head off, and he has Richie just like ride a motorcycle into a bunch of like garbage and barrels. And he's like, wasn't that thrilling? And I was like, what? What's the point of that? You crazy guy. Anyway, Richie's upset. He's like hurt a little bit. And so then he comes back, and then Tessa's mad, and Duncan's mad, and then Duncan chases after Garrick, and is like, dude, what are you doing? And they get to like an argument about humans and about human life and about living and about death and being immortal and all that stuff. And then Garrick like wanders off, and then Duncan has like this flashback of when Garrick was like, I don't even know what time period this was. Duncan looks like it's the 1800s, but I couldn't say for sure. He's just based on the clothes he's wearing. Anyway, this guy, yeah, they have guns. Yeah, they could. He had a pistol. Yeah, I could still say. Like World War I or Civil War, or I don't know. Anyway, some sort of war. It seems like it. Maybe not a war. I don't know. Anyway, so Garrick is like a doctor at this time, and he's trying to help this kid, and then the kid dies, and they have like a conversation about that. And Garrick's kind of having like an existential crisis, and the dad of the kid comes in, and is like, "You killed my son," and he pulls a pistol and shoots him. And then Duncan's like, "Get out of here, you scamp!" And then he, later on, he's like taking Garrick in a cart away from like the area to like bury him, quote unquote. And then Garrick wakes up, and they're like, "Hey," and then Garrick's like really sad that he can't be more helpful to humans and whatnot. And this is based on the conversation they had about how much Garrick's changed over time, and like people change. And Garrick has like a similar conversation with Richie, because Richie's like, "What's it like being immortal?" And he's like, "What's it like being you?" Like, right? Like, okay. Anyway, and this would be a more acceptable way to treat Richie if he was like not like a technically like, I think like an 18-year-old, right? Like he wasn't like a child, and you're like a 600-year-old immortal or whatever. So where are we going next? Let me think. Oh, okay. So then Duncan keeps going back and talking to the lady. At first, he's like pretending to be like the grandson, and then Tessa's like, "You should just tell him who you are." And he's like, "No, what's the point? She's dying anyway." And then finally, he goes back and he has like this framed newspaper article, and she's like, "Oh, did your grandfather give that to you?" And he's like, "You gave it to me." And then he reveals that he's like the Duncan that she was in love with, and we get a backstory with them where like they were together and having a good time, but then she needed to like sacrifice her relationship because her art was more important to her because she's an idiot and she was listening to feminists. And she talks, the show's pretty based, not gonna lie. Like, that's not me saying it, that's her. She's like, "Oh, I regret not having kids and I should have stayed with you and we would have been so happy and I should have never left and yada yada yada." And it's conflicting for McLeod because it's like, yeah, I love this girl, but I'm with Tessa and I love her. And he doesn't bring any of this stuff up, right? He just kind of like coddles her because she's like on her freaking deathbed. So sorry, the kids in the back. So then Garrett comes in for some reason after she like passes, after they have like this confession of like endearment towards each other, and he like says some off the wall thing and is kind of being an a-hole. And so then Duncan like throws him out of the room and then comes after him, and they end up like in the staircase, and the guy pulls a sword on him, and then Duncan pulls a sword, and they end up like fighting out into like this abandoned area like right next to the hospital, like an alleyway or something, and it's like late, and so they fight, and then Duncan knocks Garrett's sword out, and he's about to like there can be only one him, and he goes to swing, and then he like purposely misses, and then he's like, "What does it feel like?" Got him. And he's like, "Get up, you idiot." And then they meander out of there. That wraps up episode 2. So we start off with an execution. That's right, some immortal guy's getting executed. Sketchy shit. And stuff. And then we come forward to the present, and we get Mr. Joe Dawson. He's back. Hey, the Watcher's back. And he comes and talks to Duncan about some immortal that he needs help with, who's Quentin. Apparently, like, somebody was, like, digging up graves or something to, like, check records or something, and his body was just gone. So this Quentin guy who was, like, put to death and then buried or whatever, he somehow, like, dug his way out of this grave, and now he's out and about, and he's, like, a serial killer, and there's a lot of concerns that, from the Watchers, that he's going to go and get revenge on all the people that, like, had done him wrong. Right, they were involved in his execution and whatnot. And so that's most of the episode. We also get introduced to Michael. Michael is an old friend of Duncan's, and we get a little scene, a background scene, with him being in like a hospital, and then this Quentin guy apparently like hunts down and kills like this nurse, who Quentin's like, or no, Michael's like a doctor, and then he killed the nurse and didn't kill Michael for some reason, and then like took off, and Michael's like, why? And then they went, and then Michael like swears that he's going to kill Quentin and cut off his head. If he doesn't, he makes Duncan promise that Duncan will take care of it for him if he can't, right? So it's very important to remember because it shows it so well, which it is. I'm not being facetious with this, by the way. So then Michael's like a real charmer. He's like, but he's kind of flirting with Tessa, and she's like, "Oh, thank you, teehee," but I'm already taken, obviously. And so then Michael and Duncan and like Joe, to like a lesser extent, are trying to hunt down this Quentin guy before he can keep killing people, but he's always like one step ahead. Like we see him kill the priest. We don't see him, but he kills like his prosecutor. And let's see, he kills somebody else. Oh, and then he leaves like a note somewhere, and it says something. He wants to see Michael at like the insane asylum or whatever, where he was locked up back in the day. And so Duncan and Michael go up there, and then Duncan's like, "Hey, I'm gonna go in there and like get him to run out, and then you can fight him and kill him, and then we'll be good to go." And so Duncan goes inside, and he's looking around, and he's hearing like voices from the past and all this stuff. And then he hears Michael like cry out, so he runs out, and Michael's gone. And he's like, "Oh no, Quentin must have taken him. I don't know if he's alive or dead." And he's talking to Tessa and Richie about all this. And then he's like, oh, and at some point, Michael shows up, and he's like, "Hey, I found this in front of your house. I just wanted to give it to you from Duncan." And Duncan thinks it's from the Watchers because he had asked Joe. He's like, "Hey, if you want me to help like take care of this guy, you got to give me information." And Joe's like, "We can't do that." He's like, "What?" Like, why are you here? Anyway, unhelpful. So Duncan gets this paperwork, and he's like, "Oh, this must be about the guy." And he has a conversation with Richie about like the Watchers don't seem to be doing a very good job. And Duncan's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "They don't really have pictures or anything." And he's like, "Why would they have pictures?" Like, I'm sure they don't have pictures of me either, right? Because it's part of it's just they're just tracking stuff, but they also want to keep it kind of like on the DL. And so Duncan confronts Joe about getting the paperwork, and Joe's like, I told you we weren't going to give you any paperwork. And he's like, "Well, this was at my house." And he's like, "No." And he's looking at it, he's like, "Oh, this is like my friend was watching was keeping track of Quentin, and something about like he would never do that unless he was like killed, and it's like, was he killed? Like where did this paperwork come from? And then we go back to Tessa and Richie. We're just like hanging out at the new pad, the new what do you call it? The antique shop they're trying to set up. And then Michael just like shows up and he's all beat up and he's like, oh, hey, I'm looking, is Duncan here? And it's like, oh no, Duncan will be back soon. Just come rest and like recover. And she's like tending to him and he tries to like flirt with her some more. And she's like, please, Michael, don't make this awkward for anyone. And then he's like in the bathroom and you hear some screaming and Tessa runs in there and he's like, there's like writing on the mirror in red and like lipstick. And it's like, I'm coming for you or something like that. And she's like, oh my gosh. And he's like, he was here, but then he ran off. And it's like, he ran off where? This is like a tiny bathroom. Like the fuck, man. And then we quickly find out here that dun dun dun, Michael is Quentin, but it's not like he's pretending to be Quentin or Michael. It's that he's always been Michael and Quentin because he's got a split personality disorder. Fun. And then you're like, oh, you never saw them together. That's so funny. Yeah. So Quentin and Michael are the same person. But they're not the same person, right? Because he's like crazy. Like he's got like a dissociative personality disorder. And so that's fun. And so then that really comes to head because this guy's going to like kill Richie and Tessa. And Duncan comes rolling in. And then we go, the actor does a great job of being like, like I'm Quentin. I'm a psychopath. And then like, no, I'm Michael, the friendly doctor. That's so good. And so they fight and they fight and fight and they roll around and they fight some more. Oh, there's also a scene at the beginning, I forgot about this, where Duncan's looking for like a new gym to hang out with. And they go to this like private gym. This guy's like, this invitation only. And he's like, well, give me an invite. And the guy's like, and then Duncan's like, well, try me out. And so they fight and then Duncan beats him up and Joe's there. And that's when Joe comes. I forgot about that because that's going to be important for later. All right, so back to the fight. So the fight, and then Michael at some point, it's like, you gotta take care of him. You gotta keep your promise. And Duncan's like, I don't want to kill my friend. And he's like, it's too late for me. I can't control this anymore. And then it turns back into Quentin. He's like, McLeod, what are you gonna do? And Duncan's like, I'm gonna keep my word. And he goes, bam, and cuts his head off. And it's like, the quickening and all that fun stuff. And then we get a shot for the ladies. We get a whole scene for the ladies, and it's just Adrian, whatever this guy's name is, who plays Duncan McLeod, with his like sexy model body, which is like rippling in muscles, with his beautiful long hair. And he's shirtless, and he's just doing like, I don't know, Tai Chi. I don't know what the fuck he's doing. He's doing some sort of martial art, and he's all sweaty and hot looking, and this goes on for like minutes. And I was like, damn USA. I think this, you know what you're doing. And then Joe wanders in, and he's like, it's a real shame. I lost a close friend. And then Duncan just keeps like being sexy and doing like martial arts, and then he's like, I lost one too. And then he like gets on his knees to like meditate or whatever. I don't know. It's pretty fucking good though. Wowzers, we're just 4 episodes into this fucking season and we're blowing this whole thing up again. So we blew it up the first time by introducing the Watchers and having all that crazy shenanigans and killing that guy and whatnot. But here we go. So the episode starts off and we see this creepy guy and he's like torturing this woman, and then this immortal comes, and this guy who's like torturing the lady, he's not an immortal, but he lures these immortals in and then he gets them into like a pitch black room and then fights them with like a night vision goggles and kills them. All right, that's like his whole opus. It's his whole operation. Sometimes it sucks when it's stupid. Anyway, so it is okay. So clearly that's, we're gonna see what happens with that. What does he do with the lady he had kidnapped? Who knows? Maybe he kills her too. Why not? Anyway, we go and Richie, they're all at a club, and Richie introduces Duncan and Tessa to his like girlfriend of the week, which is this like the prettiest girlfriend he's had thus far, this pretty blonde girl. And she doesn't have like frizzy 80s hair for like the first time in this fucking show, or like a short hair, like man cut short, like the, what do they call it? The gross pixie cut or whatever, which used to be hot for people. It was never my thing. I like long hair, but it used to be like hot in the 80s until like the dyke lesbians like ruined it. That's mean. Dyke lesbians aren't that bad. It's mostly the crazy like people. It's like with the colored hair and the tattoos got ruined by crazy people too. Like it's like, oh, it used to be. I remember Suicide Girls, and now you see girls with like tattoos and colored hair, and you're like, oh, that's like a warning. Stay away forever. She is insane. Like not just like fun insane, but like completely out of her fucking mind. Anyway. So anyway, she's a palm reader, or she does like tarot reading or some crazy nonsense. And so she reads like Tessa's hand, and it's like all super dark and terrible and whatnot. And she's freaking out because normally she just does like, fun seances or fun palm readings, or like the kind of like jokey kind. But clearly, the first blow up in this episode is that magic is real, and this girl can foresee the future. And she does it multiple times, and it's like, what the fuck? Like, no joke. And then Duncan's walking away with Tessa because Tessa's kind of freaking out by this woman being like so crazy. And then he has a flashback, and he's with like some like not Romanians, like Romanji or whatever. Like he's with gypsies. So he's with some gypsies, and he's like about to have sex with this girl, and then she pulls like a TikTok woman and like flips out, runs out, is like, this man tried to rape me, and he's like, bro, all of you know me. We're like engaged to get married. Like, what? I don't know what she's talking about. And she's like, look at his hand. And the guy looks at his hand. He's like, there it is, something. And he's like, I don't even understand what's happening right now. So the guy like pulls out a dagger, tries to stab him, and like Duncan's able to like calm everybody down. And then he's like, "You need to marry my sister right now." And he's like, "Whoa! I was gonna get married to her anyway, but no one's gonna force me to do shit because he's a man. Of course not. Like, the fuck is going on here?" And he's like, "Then you have to leave." And he's like, "Okay." Then this like babe, by the way, this hot like gypsy chick, she's like, "I curse you, Duncan MacLeod, that you will never get married and you will never know happiness," and whatever. And he's like, "Okay, bye, crazy." But clearly, spoiler alert, that is exactly what happens. So then Duncan, back to the present, he proposes to Tessa. She agrees. Hurry, they're gonna get married. Later on, they tell Richie, everyone's having like a blast, having a good time. Duncan, at the club, actually, first, he sees somebody who looks like he's following him, and so he tries to like go figure out what's going on. Can't figure out what's going on there. Then, like, the next day when they're all celebrating and talking about the wedding and stuff, Duncan sees like the guy again, and so he like runs out of his place and like chases him down and like knocks him into some garbage and is about to beat the shit out of him and like interrogate him, when a motorcycle comes by and like hits Duncan off him, and the guy hops on and then they take off. Meanwhile, the creepy guy from the beginning, he rolls into Duncan's place, zaps Richie with like a taser, and then zaps Tessa and steals her. Oh no. So Duncan gets back. He's flipping out about the whole situation. He's got to figure out what's going on. And so he's like looking around, trying to discover stuff. And then he summons like the girl who can like foresee the future to talk to him. He like harasses her a couple times, because he's like super upset at the whole thing. But she clearly saw something, and he needs like more information so that he can track her down and whatnot. And so finally they like come to terms with like she's like a wizard, with like clairvoyance and whatever else, future reading. And so she gives him her number. Like, she's like, tell me how this all resolves. I don't think you ever see this chick again, but it's too bad because she's, again, like one of the hottest chicks in the show thus far. Anyway, so then he does some more research. It's like she saw like a Tudor home with like colored windows or whatever. And so he like leaves. And then Richie is like sitting around just kind of like, like doing the thumb thing. It's like when... Twiddling his thumbs, that's what it's called. When he gets a call from like Creepazoid, and he tells him to tell Duncan to come to the address. So Richie, of course, goes because it's Richie. And then Duncan grabs him and is like, I'm going to go in, you stay out here. And Richie's like, got it. And of course, Richie goes in, gets got immediately. And then Duncan goes in. Oh, also the whole thing with like the light and the darkness gets brought up. And so Duncan brings like flash powder or something to the fight. So they're fighting in the darkness. Duncan's doing all right. And then finally he pulls out like the flash powder and tosses it. And then he's able to like kill the guy. And then he rescues Tessa, rescues Richie, and then he's like, hey, you guys head home. I want to investigate, like, what the fuck this guy is and, like, what's going on with this whole fucking thing, if he's, like, a member of the Watchers or whatnot. And I'll see you guys later. So he's, like, he gets on the computer and he's doing, like, TV computer stuff where he's like, click, 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 right? Like, I mean, I had a search browser in the 90s. That's not how it fucking worked. You did type a lot. Like, there was, like, the mouse was almost non-existent. It was all keyboard commands. So it's not as bad as like some of these shows, like these modern shows, even where it's like, I'm going to fight this hacker, and it's like click, 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 click. And it's like, that's not how any of this works. Most of it's just algorithms. You like hit enter, or you like click on the mouse. Like, no one's typing fucking commands like that. Anyway. And then outside, Tessa and Richie are about to get in the car to drive off when this hoodlum just like shows up, like a random fucking hoodlum. And he's like, give me all your money and give me the keys to the car. So they do, and then he shoots them both. And then Duncan hears the gunshots and runs outside. And then we get like dust in the wind. It's a really sad moment. I know I'm laughing, but it was like, dust in the wind. If you haven't heard it, yeah, go ahead and like ask Gemini or whatever to send it to you. I'll figure it out. It's like dun 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 dun. Anyway, we get like flashbacks of all the times they spent together and Tess and everything. Oh, and then we see like Richie waking up from like being dead, and it's like blow up number 2. So the first thing is like magic is real in this fucking world. Blow up number 2 is that Tess is dead. So like the fuck, that whole thing. And then blow up number 3 is like fucking Richie is now an immortal. Like the fuck. It's that wraps up the episode. Richie's just like standing outside the thing, and Duncan like feels his presence and walks outside. He's like, "You're one of us now." And then they both just like walk off. And I was like, "Damn, that was a great episode." Like of TV. Fuck. So I'm starting to realize, like I was thinking about when Richie became an immortal and Tessa died, and for some reason in my head, from all the years ago when I watched all these things, I thought it was like the 3rd or 4th season that happened. And that's because it technically is. Like, I was like watching this episode 5, and I was thinking about this whole situation because the episode starts with him buying the gym. So there, in one of the previous episodes, I don't know if I mentioned this because it was just like a minor point, but he goes somewhere to like work out at a gym, and he has to like fight the guy, and he beats the guy. And this guy's black and Italian, which is important because it comes up in this episode a couple times. But anyway. And so the guy is like, doesn't have any money, and the water doesn't work and whatever. And so, because Tessa died and they had the antique business together or whatever, it's time for like a change of pace. And so he buys the gym and like starts taking care of it and starts living there. And then he has like this guy run it for him. And so he becomes like the new secondary character outside of Richie. Now that Tessa's gone, right? Okay. And so then I was like, I think I figured out why I thought this was like the 4th season in my head, because it's the 4th arc. Like if we're looking at it like a manga or an anime series, then it's like, this is the 4th arc. The first arc is when they were living in the antique. Second arc is Paris with Darius and stuff. Third arc was the beginning of this season, like the first 4 episodes, right? Which is like the Watchers, and that, kind of bleeds into it. And then now we're on the 5th arc. Right? So we're the 2nd season, starting with the 5th episode, but it's also the 5th arc. And that's why I was like, oh, okay, because like so much happens in between these things. Like there's, it's like contained. And granted, the first season, especially the first half of the first season, like the first arc is essentially just a Monster of the Week story that doesn't have too many connecting parts. But by the time you get to like the 2nd arc, when they go to Paris, everything starts like connecting because you have recurring characters outside of the main 3, right? And then they return to New York or LA or Gotham or the fuck they're supposed to be. And then, continues that forward. And so it's like the arcs, right? So that's where we're gonna go with now. So this is the 4th arc. No, this is the 5th arc. So this is the 5th arc, which is the Richie becoming an immortal arc and learning how to live as an immortal. And so this whole episode like concentrates very heavily on that. Like there's like 4 or 5 montages of him training. He trains kendo with, I can't remember the guy. I'll get it next episode. But with the gym trainer, he trains sword fighting with McLeod. He trains boxing with the gym guy like twice, right? So he's really trying to get himself up and at it. And so the episode starts, and McLeod's obviously like very distraught still about the whole Tessa situation. And so Richie's trying to cheer him up, so he takes him out to eat some hot dogs or whatever, and then they see like this bank robbery, or I thought it was a bank robbery at first, but it ends up being these like Irish terrorists trying to kill like some Englishmen or something. Like it's not very clear, but they're obviously, I don't know why they're like in Gotham, but they are they're trying to kill somebody. And so Richie like sees it and like tries to stop. He grabs this lady from like using like a machine pistol, and then she ends up shooting like her husband, who's a member of this like crew, and then she gets caught up by the police. And then McLeod comes running over, and then they look at each other, and it's dun dun dun. Not only is she an immortal, but she's an immortal he knew from like back in the day, and they kind of had like a thing, not a romantic thing. We find out about that later, but they had like a close friendship and like would they want they kind of situation it seems. But at some point, he was like hanging out with her, and then she had like her cause, quote unquote, which is like kill the English, I guess, or drive things to Ireland. I don't know why the fuck they're here in New York or Gotham or whatever. But but they look at each other, and he picks up a ring, and that's super important. And then he has like a flashback of them hanging out and like being friends back in the day and whatnot. And so we get a lot of training, and then Richie gets yelled at by McLeod, and he gets pushed really hard by McLeod. Oh, they have like a whole wrestling thing, and then Richie gets mad, and then the black guy's like, hey, you gotta lay off him and train him better. And then they train, and he trains, and he learns all sorts of fighting techniques, including one that helps him like beat the lady later on. And the lady has like a blood feud, and she's like arrested, but then she jumps out of a window, so she's supposed to be like dead and all this stuff. And eventually McLeod, because Richie heard her say something in Gaelic, like Charlie Solis or whatever, which means lighthouse in Gaelic, I guess. I don't know if I even said that right. But so he goes and finds her, and then they talk, like she wants to fight, and he's like, no, and they talk about like losing life and a blood debt to Richie and how she should leave Richie alone. Oh, and that's because she tried to fight Richie before, and he didn't even have his fucking sword. Like, she's a real asshole. And like busts up his hand, and like he escapes on his motorcycle by blasting through a window, which is fucking sweet as hell. Anyway, so then they talk, and then they end up fucking, and then she was like, man, we should have done that before, and things have been different, blah, 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 blah. And she still doesn't want to, she still wants to fight Richie and all this stuff, and, it's complicated. Like, you get on Facebook or the fuck people are using these days, the relationship status is complicated. Anyway, so then anyway, she, he pretty much, they leave, and she's like, I'm going to kill him, and he's like, if you kill him, I'm going to come after you. It's like the cycle of violence or whatever. And so he goes back, and then Richie talks to him about it, and he's like, you need to get out of town. And he's like, and Richie's like, what's going on with you two? And it's like, it's complicated. And he's like, okay, I see where it's going. So then Richie sneaks out of there, grabs his katana, and heads to this lighthouse. And so he gets there, and then they him and the lady yell at each other, and then Duncan realizes that he went after her, so he heads over. And then Richie and the lady, Anne, I think is her name, they start fighting. And because Richie was trained so well by Duncan, but mostly because she's a woman. Just kidding. But Richie's able to beat her, and he's almost about to cut off her head, but he can't do it. It's too hard, so he screams, and then he goes and mopes, and then Duncan comes down because he showed up, and then she's like, I'm still gonna get you. You should have killed me. I'd have killed you. And Duncan's like, you gotta stop this, you dumb bitch. And she's like, okay, I'll stop. And then they hug it out. And then later on that evening, Richie and Duncan are hanging out, and Richie's like, man, I should have done it, something. And Duncan's like, don't lose who you are, bro. You are who you are. Some people are worth killing, some people are not. You'll figure it out. And he's like, all right, man. Does it ever get easier? And he's like, no. And a lot of this episode is so excellent written and placed because she's dealing with the same thing that he's dealing with, right? Where her husband just got killed, and now she wants revenge, and she's not handling it well. And then Duncan is also not handling the death of Tessa well, and he sees where he could be going and how he could let revenge and all this stuff take over his life, but he doesn't, and because he's starting to he's a better man than she's a woman, I guess, that he is gonna and he sees the effect it had on her and how it made her so crazy that he this is helping him heal. And it's a whole episode that's really based on Richie and starting his arc being and the training arc and the mentor arc and stuff for Duncan, but it also includes Duncan learning how to move past Tessa again. I say again because he's had he's been alive for 40 years, so this is not the first time he's lost a love of his life. And he loved Tessa the most, it seems, but that could just be recency bias. Anyway, fantastic fucking episode all around. So now we move from a Richie-centric episode to a no Richie at all episode. This one focuses a lot on our friend. I didn't catch his name again. I'm sorry. I'm he's the guy, the black Italian guy who was a Navy SEAL, which, is super important for reasons, I guess. But it comes up again. So we start the episode off, and there's a guy, he claims to be a news reporter, but we find out later he's a watcher that's going to, investigate what's going on at this televangelist, essentially, is, trying to stir up people in the quote-unquote zone, because this is Gotham City. I'm getting more and more to that. So you have, these people that are so, it's just, this huge block of area where it's, they have a free clinic, and everybody's living on the street and super poor, and it's just a miserable section of town, and nobody goes there because if you go there you get raped 7 times in a row or whatever. I'm playing Chained Echoes while watching this, and highly recommended. You should definitely, if you like JRPGs at all, if you like Clair Obscur, if you liked any of Final Fantasy VI particularly is what this is really cribbing off of, but it cribs off kind of some other stuff too, a little bit off Chrono Cross, or not Chrono Cross, Chrono Trigger as well. But it is excellent. That being aside, there's a story with one of the characters, and his whole background is oh yes, my sister ended up in the poor part of town, and she was raped by everybody, and it was that's dark. So that kind of reminded me of the zone. It's super. People keep talking about how dangerous it is and how someone like Duncan MacLeod can't get over there. And I'm like, what are you trying to say? Is it because he looks too clean? Because you look super clean, black guy, but is it because you're black? Because there's lots of white guys in the zone. In fact, there's the vast majority, including this televangelist guy who's wearing a freaking suit, is white, and all his minions are white. But then the guy's friend over there, his quote unquote contact, Asia, if you can't guess by that name, she's also super black. Well, she's not super black. She's just like regular black because he's like a half black and half my people. So that's fun. But anyway, so they jump this guy and throw him into the river or kill him or whatever. And so, fuck. The Watcher homie, God, what was his name? It's been a minute. John? I think it's John Dawson. So John shows up and asks McLeod for some help. He's looking into this thing. And so McLeod gets concerned because if he's asking, there might be an immortal involved. And then we get like a flashback. And he had friends with some guy who wasn't immortal, but was like with the West Virginia like mining crew. And this is another one of those things where it's like life's just a simulation. Like I literally listened to like this podcast or somebody. It was Wendigoon, highly recommended as well. He does a lot of like videos about horror stuff and history stuff and plays some video games. He's very insightful and good. I got into him because he was going over like Paradiso and Inferno and the other one. But because he was like very religious as well, but then he got more into like cryptids and stuff like that. Anyway, so he has this whole he has like an hour-long video about the West Virginia like oil or coal riots or whatever, about the Pinkertons and about Sally Mae and all that stuff. Very good. So I listened to it like a week or two ago, and then this episode is literally about that, and I was like, oh, it's so excellent. I know a lot about this because the show doesn't describe it; it just assumes. And this is one of the things I like about older shows is they just kind of like assume you know most of the stuff because public education was a complete garbage back in the day. So you'd actually learn about like American history or like European history and have like a vague idea of like what's going on or why these things are that. So they don't really have to explain everything to you, which doesn't make any sense. Like if this show is made now, and that's my concern. I heard that Henry Cavill's headlining a Highlander movie, and Henry Cavill is freaking sweet. So I'm actually pretty excited about it. And I hope it's just like a Highlander movie, like the movies. It doesn't try to be like the TV show, which the TV show is excellent in its own way. But the movies are just like, I'm immortal. Here's some crazy stuff I do. Here's some cool sword fighting at the end. And it's like, yes, that is what I want. I want that. And if you could somehow bring Sean Connery back into it, mwah. I think he's still alive. No, I think he died. No, he's dead. That's too bad. But maybe Lambert, he's so old though. Like that wouldn't make any sense. Maybe if you brought Adrian back, the guy who plays Duncan MacLeod, that would be fantastic. He can't be that old. Like you could de-age him a little bit. Anyway, I hope it's all practical effects and like silly like lightning powers and all that stuff. Oh, it'd be so good. I'm sorry, I'm getting so distracted. I just like learned about this the other day. I was like, what? Henry Cavill? Excellent. He's so amazing at everything. Like that first season of The Witcher, when he's in it, it's so good. It's so freaking good. He's barely in it, which is sad, but it's excellent. He's good in The Man from Nowhere or The Man from U.N.C.L.E. or whatever. I can't remember what it's called, but he's one of those like spy movies. And then he was excellent in Mission Impossible. He's so good. He was good. He was a super good Superman too, despite what's his face trying to be dark and edgy with Superman, which is retarded. Anyway, all that aside, I go about this. I'm ranting a little bit because this episode doesn't really have a lot going on. There's no immortals. So Duncan goes to investigate. This guy's not an immortal. He reminds him of his buddy. He's just kind of like, whatever. And then he wants to get involved because the guy's like clearly an evil a-hole, and he's just like taking advantage of these people to like run a little empire over there. And so then him and him and Dawson get into like an argument about it because Dawson sent him over there, but then because it's not an immortal thing, Dawson's like, why? I don't know why you're involved. And then Duncan keeps having these flashbacks to his buddy who was like fighting with the Pinkertons. Like his father owned like the coal mine, and then he felt sympathy for the coal miners, and so he went with the coal miners, and they went to like revolt, and they all got killed, including the son. And Duncan just like stood by and watched because that's what he does. And then and there's a whole thing. The show is so well written, and there's a whole overlying about like having to do something, and that's why Duncan acts now because he felt like he should have acted before. Maybe he could have done something or saved some lives, but now he can. So he goes to act, and then so we meet Asia. She runs the free clinic, and she's super shady because people start kind of like figuring out that Duncan. So they like kill Duncan, quote unquote, right? But he survives obviously because he's immortal, and his friend's like super concerned because he's like, how did you live through that? Blah blah blah. And then he's talking to Asia later, and she's like, sorry about your friend, and he's like, no, he's fine. He just like swam out of there, and she's like, oh, okay. And then the televangelist guy like finds out, or he like knows that Duncan's alive, so clearly she's like working with him, which is later on. They make like a plan to meet up and have this whole like thing where the people are going to like revolt, like the homeless people are going to revolt and throw this guy to their neighborhood because he's dangerous and they don't like him and whatnot. And the SEAL guy is going to use some of his connections and all that. And he tells some like fun SEAL story at the end, or not like a story, but he talks about how like the haunted look of some of these guys who are like lifers and like killed people for a living for like 20, 30 years and how they just have this haunted look, and that Duncan has that too. Duncan's like, yeah, you bet I do. Sorry, we're kind of all over the place. So then he goes and he gets like ambushed at the clinic because that's where the meeting spot's quote unquote supposed to be, but Duncan knew that he had suspicions about her, so he went in there and like purposely got like caught up so he could like, so the real meeting could take place somewhere else, something like that. Anyway, And so then Asia like betrays him, obviously, because she's working with the guy, and then she makes some comment about something to him, and then he flips out, and then he throws Duncan and her, and she ends up like knocking Duncan out with like a huge 2x4. But they throw us both into like a freezer to die, and then Duncan's able to get him out of there, and then they go to the meeting where the guy's gonna like kill everybody, and then Duncan's like, I'm gonna teach you a lesson about respect, and beats the crap out of him like multiple times, and then forgives Asia or whatever, and yeah, that's pretty much the episode. It was good. It was really good. No, I should say nothing too life shattering, but fun stuff. So we pick up the next episode, and hey, it's Amanda. She's back. You remember Amanda? Well, that's okay if you don't, because this show spends like 10 minutes re-showing us who she is. She's essentially she is Catwoman to Duncan MacLeod's Batman, if you will. Like, she's like a thief and a criminal, and she's also an immortal, and she like keeps popping up and down in Duncan's life, and they like have romantic trysts and then don't, and then they're kind of enemies, but they're also friends. It's Catwoman Batman. If you know anything if you don't know what that is, I can't help you, but that's like the closest thing to it. It's very like femme fatale, very like noir, very like classic kind of like bad girl, I can fix her kind of stuff going on with Amanda. But then, like I said, so we spent half this episode recalling like an event they shared together in Germany back before World War II started, dealing with like the ever increasing power of the National Socialist Party. And the other half is on a modern day thing that's tied in. Again, this show, I'd like to reiterate, this show is excellently written, because at first you're like seeing these scenes from like Germany, and there's like a whole thing with like a counterfeit $100 bill plate that Amanda's getting and hiding, and she's trying to escape Berlin. And then Duncan is working with some scientists. He's trying to get out of Berlin because he's got like a lot of physics knowledge, and he's going to be sent to like the Manhattan Project and all that stuff, right? And again, as I reiterate with this, the show does not write this out for you specifically. It's just like Duncan's working with a physicist. They're kind of talking about stuff. Duncan burns some stuff. He's got to get him out of Germany before like the National Socialists take over, because it's going to cause a lot of problems if he doesn't, and he's going to send him to America, and it's all this good stuff. And then he gets betrayed by this German guy that's supposed to help him get this guy out of there. And then Amanda's like in there too, because they're immortals and they've been around forever and they're doing stuff, and she's trying to get out of Berlin. And so eventually, after Duncan gets betrayed, Amanda shows up, helps save the scientist, and then Duncan sends the scientist and her off in a plane to America while he sticks behind and shoots the shit out of these like National Socialists, these Krauts. And this is before the World War II sets off, but it's like after they've taken over, right? And it's like it's so excellently written, and it's super fun. And this could have just been an episode by itself, them just interacting. But then when we go to the modern era, Amanda like shows up in Duncan's life, and she's like flirting, and she wants to like comfort him because Tessa's gone, and he's like, yeah, I'm not ready yet, but they still fuck. Don't worry, everybody. This is a show that was on USA in like the 1990s. Like, they fuck. Don't worry about it. But she's also being tracked by these like two guys who end up being in the FBI, because she's still got those plates and they want them. Anyway, they find out that one of these FBI guys is a real crook. I mean, both of them are crooks, because like literally he like accosts her in like a hotel of a hallway, and then Duncan like pushes him off, and then the other guy shoots him. And it's like, what kind of fucking FBI agents are going to just pull a gun and be like, you're under arrest? They're going to shoot a guy in a fucking hallway in like a hotel in like the middle of the fucking day. And granted, it's Gotham City, so like it is what it is, but still. Anyway, so at some point, they beat up like one of the guys. This is later on, and then like the main detective guy, this bald dude, he like kills him, and then gets like a tape of them going to like the scene of the crime, and he's gonna like pin it on him unless they give him the plates. And so they set up this whole like turnabout. Like the Prestige, right? So they go and they give him the plates, and he gives them the tape, and then he shoots them into like the water, and so they die. But the whole time that's happening, Richie's like filming it, and of course they're immortal, so like YOLO. So so they wake up and they swim back to like the side of the river, and Richie picks them up, and they turn the tape into like the newspaper. And we don't have like our cute investigative reporter lady anymore, which is unfortunate, because she was hot and she was fun, but that was like that was a previous arc, so she no longer exists as far as anyone's concerned. Anyway. And then Amanda and Duncan, like Duncan's like, hey, something I always love you or care for you, but like now's not a good time because, I'm still grieving over Tessa, even though I've fucked like 2 different women over the last like 3 days. And she's like, got it. I'll catch you later. And he's like, yep, I'll see you later. And then, and Richie's involved a little bit in this episode as well. They fence and they do some other fun stuff as well. So it's super good. Excellent episode all around. And it's nice to see her back. And she becomes a very popular character in the show. So get used to her being around. Especially she has her own season, so at some point like a spin-off season that we'll watch after we get through the 6 seasons of this thing. I feel like I made a little mistake here when I was claiming about the arcs. Not that I still believe the show's written in arcs, like anime style or manga style, but I named it as like the Richie training arc, and Richie's barely been in like the last couple episodes. So really, it's about Charlie. Charlie's the black guy who's half Italian, half black. It's they should say the dojo guy. So once again, Charlie is kind of one of the main characters of the episode. Obviously, Duncan is always the driving force, but Charlie brings in a new element. He is being like a extra or a stunt double or something for his buddy's movie. And his buddy is this like Chinese kid. I didn't catch his name, but it's almost like kind of like a Bruce Lee style thing where he's doing some kung fu stuff and there's some like blonde lady who's the producer and it's being filmed at like Duncan's dojo, right? And Charlie and this guy, I think they like grew up in the same neighborhood. They're like buddies of some sort. It seems like Charlie partially trained this kid, but also he had like other martial arts training as well. And so he's super fit and handsome. And, you know, it's like Bruce Lee. Like, he's like extremely fit, toned up, and like doing martial arts stuff and making some of these like fun movies or whatever. Anyway, there's someone gets killed, like one of the ninja like assistants or whatever. Like he fights the ninjas in the movie, which is kind of funny because ninjas had nothing to do with China, and this guy's doing kung fu, and then he has, the main antagonist of this episode is like Liang, which is clearly like a Chinese name, and then there's like a Chinese, I think he's a Taoist monk, just by the way he's dressed and kind of his philosophy, but I don't know if the show recognizes that. I kind of feel like it does, because I feel like the writers in the show thus far have been crushing it, like with their historical accuracy generally, and just kind of like bare understanding of things. The other possibility would be like a sect of Buddhism I'm unaware of. But anyway, so that's fun because I like the Taoist thing is like I'm a huge fan of. So like I said, one of the ninjas dies. When I say ninjas, I mean like the actor who plays the ninja. He gets killed because he drinks some tea that's been poisoned, and then they're like, well, he drank like I'm going to just call him Bruce Lee. The Bruce Lee guy's tea, and he died. And so then Duncan and Charlie get very concerned about him and his safety, and then he's very brash and he just wants to make a lot of money and be successful, and him and Duncan get into like some arguments about stuff, and then the producer kind of is like, you stay out of my business and all this stuff. And then there's like he's out doing like a press tour or something. Oh no, they're doing like a shot on location somewhere, like at a park or whatever, and because Duncan offered to be his like bodyguard or whatever. And then there's like a drive-by shooting, and while this is going on, we flip back and forth to the Leon guy who's like the head of this gang that has like a red tomahawk. And then after the drive-by shooting that misses because Charlie saves the guy after Duncan like warns him, that they go back to the dojo and it's been kind of smashed up and there's a mark of like a red tomahawk. And that's when Duncan has like a flashback to like, I wouldn't say ancient China, but just kind of like a little bit earlier in life where he had like a run-in with the same gang. And so then he goes to like his Taoist monk friend, and they just have a fun conversation about reincarnation and about just kind of like life in general and about the philosophy and about him and Duncan and their relationship. He keeps calling him grandpa. He calls him grandfather, right? Which is like a very traditional like Chinese thing. It's like you call old men with a lot of respect, like grandfather, grandmother, and then aunts and uncles. If they're just like less old and less respectful somewhat, not unrespectful, obviously, but like, like grandfather is like the head of the house. So it's like an elder who's very, very well esteemed. And that's why you kind of you see that kind of stuff in like, if you're an American, like in Hawaii or even parts like California and Washington, because there's a large population of like Chinese, Japanese, Korean immigrants. That's kind of like a cultural way of discussing, like, instead of just being like, oh, the elder, or like, the wise old man, it's grandpa. Okay, or grandfather. So then there's some more shenanigans with Duncan and the Bruce Lee kid going back and forth. Duncan like beats him up and the guy storms off, and then Duncan gets concerned. He goes and like confronts this Leon guy at some point, and the guy tries to play like Russian roulette with him, but then Duncan beats him up and like he tells him to leave the guy alone. And there's like a whole story where the kid, he like came to, and Duncan finally gets this information from him. It's like the kid came to like America with his
like dad and uncles, and like some of his family died on the trip over or something, and they were like super poor, and his dad was just like washing dishes or whatever in Gotham here. And so he joined a gang to like get some money, but then, you know, he dishonored his family, and his father like abandoned him. So then he came to like stay with the monk who kind of turned his life around. And that got him to leave the gang, but like you can't leave the gang, right? So now that's why the Leon guy wants him dead. So he's out at like the monastery, hanging out with a bunch of kids, kind of encouraging them to learn martial arts, to learn discipline, and to do all that stuff. Hey, Gunner. And then he... awesome, man. So then... I'm just out in my backyard. So at that juncture, there's like another attempt on his life, and then Duncan knocks him out, and then the guy runs off to confront Leong, and then Duncan goes over there, and then there's like some fights, and finally Duncan convinces him to abandon trying to get revenge on this guy and to just turn him over to the police. And then Duncan and the approaches the Bruce Lee guy at the monastery, because during the last assassin attempt, the monk died, and there was like a whole fun or kind of tragic or, you know, interesting story about him talking about being reincarnated as a fish, and that the one thing Duncan can do for him after he dies is don't eat fish. Which is pretty good. Anyway, so then he approaches him at the monastery, and the Bruce Lee guy is just like kind of cleaning up and chilling. So then Duncan convinces him to go back and follow his dreams and live up to the legacy of the monk, which is the wraps up the episode 8.
We continue our arc of Charlie and racism. It's a strong theme in this one. We even get we get nigger a couple of times by this ex-slave guy, Carl, who is an immortal that Duncan met during the 1800s. He was a slave, and then he was killed kind of just by some asshole slave master / I don't know, like plantation owner or whatever. And then he was immortal. So there you go. So then he went north and hung out. And then he decided he needed to do some more good. So he came back down to the south and worked on helping to free slaves. So he's a very noble guy. And then we see all this in flashbacks with Duncan and him. So I guess I should do this in order. So the episode starts, and we get. Does it start with that? I'm trying to remember. I almost think it starts, if I remember correctly, it starts with like some background stuff with him. He's trying to rescue some slaves, this Carl guy, and then Duncan like rolls up in like his old farmy truck in like the whatever era, and then he hops out to like protect them, and he takes a shot, right? Because he senses like an immortal, so he comes to see what's going on, so that Carl can help the other guys get away. And then we'll just continue with this line. And so then later on in like another flashback, we see that Duncan like wakes up and he goes and he helps like the Carl get the other slaves free, and then he rescues Carl, and then they like have a chit chat about being noble and about helping other people. And it's a very good establishment of like who Carl was at one point, and all the hope and optimism, and how he was like striving to be a better person as an immortal. And then when we go to the modern era, we see that he's just like a 2-bit thief. Like we see him go to like, he like stole gold and was selling it to some guys, and they tried to like backstab him, but instead he got the money, and he's got like a little crew of dudes, and he like steals a car, and then he like sideswipes Charlie while Duncan's with him, and then so Duncan and Charlie kind of try to run after him, and Duncan recognizes him, and then Charlie's like, "What are you looking at, man? Oh man, this guy like ran in my car and he owes me money and blah blah blah." And so Charlie ends up going to the police to like report him and like the guy who like signaled for like the car thing. Meanwhile, Duncan goes and tracks down Carl, and they have like a conversation about what happened to him and about how like it's, so after the slave stuff, Carl was talking about like, he's like, so Duncan's like, "What are you gonna do next?" He's like, "Well, I'm gonna head up and join I want to be a baseball player and be a shining example to other like young black men and like that. And then join the Negro League and all that stuff, and maybe make it big someday." And he does, but he doesn't make it big because there's like an incident where, like, I don't know, it just doesn't pan out. I don't think it like clearly states why, but at some point they're like at a restaurant somewhere, like when he's in his baseball career. This is like a third flashback later on. And he's being super successful, but he's starting to get disheartened by the whole thing, by racism and whatnot. And then McLeod and him are like at a restaurant, and the lady's like, "Oh, it's whites only." And then this officer of the law is like, "You boys can't be here. Like, the rules." And then Duncan's like, "What? You're the sheriff, supposed to enforce the law, not like do whatever you want." He's like, "I'm only a sheriff when I'm on the clock." And Duncan like knocks him out.
And then they like run off, and then Carl's like super concerned, and he's like, "No, man." And he shows him a newspaper, and it's like segregation has been like deemed unconstitutional by the Supreme Court right at this time, and he's so happy and excited. It's like, what happened in all this time? And it's like things just didn't work out. He got kind of like caught up with depression and whatnot, and just moved to like a life of crime, and not taking care of kids. And he's got like a couple buddies, that he's kind of mentoring as like criminals, right? Meanwhile, there's like a police investigation on Carl. That kind of gets kicked off by Charlie when he goes to like identify the thieves, and we find out that one of these guys, this like mustache twirling bald villain guy, he is actually a member of like the Watchers, but he's a member of like the evil Watchers, right? Like the ones that were part of like his crew. So he wants to kill. So he like lies to Charlie and says that Carl's like wanted for murder in Arizona, and there's like a warrant out for his arrest, and if anything he can do to help. And then Charlie comes and confronts Carl and Duncan, who are like just hanging out having a good time because they're like old immortal buddies. And then they get into like an argument, and there's a whole argument about like I love it. This would never be on TV these days. It's so freaking fantastic. So there's a whole argument about like Charlie being like a mixed blood essentially because he's half Italian, and then like Carl says he's like a white man in a black man's body or whatever, and then Charlie's like, "Go F yourself," essentially. I mean, this is like on cable TV in the 90s. No one swore, but it's but again, it's like they're like tossing like Negro around like at each other. It's excellent. And not because of that. It's just like, man, I remember when things were uncensored and people could just like be honest and like speak the truth and like talk how people talk on the street. Like that was excellent. Like we should go back to that era, right? Like using as V, the Romanian guy would say, using gamer words. Right. Anyway, so they kind of like get mad at each other, and then Duncan like calms them both down and gets them to like come to an agreement that like they can like live and let live or whatever. And then Duncan the whole time is like preaching essentially to Carl about like, hey man, what happened to like the optimistic guy, whatever. And then he keeps trying to throw around like the black card, and Duncan's like, absolutely not. Like, shut up. Like things are not that, like, man, you were a slave. Like, get out of here. It's that bad. And I was like, holy cow, this is so based. Like, and this came out in the 90s. Like, I couldn't even imagine a show like an episode like this coming out now, where it's like, man, you are retarded if you think things are as bad as like antebellum South. Like, get out of here. And the guy's like, yeah, you're right. It's like, yeah, he's right. Like, that's retarded. Like, are you kidding me? Like, yeah, you live in Gotham City, and yeah, there's this cop, but the cop, and then we find out, yeah, at some point that like this cop ends up being a member of the Watchers, right? So it's not even a racial thing with him. He's trying to kill him because he's an immortal and because he knows he's immortal. And so eventually they like set up a trap. So they go and they track down the police officer, because we find out from the kid that the Watcher guy was gonna like kill this kid. He was like beating the crap out of him, and then his partner like stopped him. And so they go track down the partner, and they're like, hey man, this guy's doing like real shady stuff, maybe you should help. And so he's like, all right, fine. And so then they trick the Watcher cop to approach Carl when he's just like hanging on a dock or whatever. And meanwhile, Duncan's like sneaking around like Metal Gear Solid again, like Solid Snake, up on like the rafters, like on like not the rafters, they're outside, on like a crane or whatever. And then the police partner is like watching this whole thing unfold. And so the guy like wanders up, and he has an axe and a shotgun because he's going to cut his head off. And he's like yelling at this. Carl's like, I didn't do nothing. He's like, I didn't kill anybody. He's like, I don't care if you didn't kill anybody. You're a monster. You kind of people deserve to die. It's this other police officer's like, holy cow. Because it just looks like racism. And it kind of is racism, but it's like actual racism because it's like immortals versus humans. And not like pretend racism, which is like race is defined by some nobleman in like 17th century England because he was an a-hole and like just wanted to be able to like take advantage of other cultures without feeling guilty about it. So anyway, so then eventually the cop gets shot and falls into the water, and obviously he gets like convicted or whatever. And then Carl like turns over a new leaf, so he goes and like tries out for, it looks like the Atlanta Braves. So they head from wherever Gotham's at down to Atlanta. And then he makes a team because he can throw like 100-mile-an-hour like fast pitch or whatever, because he's he's an immortal first of all, so he's extra strong and fast. And then he's also he was like the top pitcher or whatever in like the Negro League back in the day, so he's still got it. And so then they talk about doing that and making a difference and just kind of like being an example to other young men and going out and doing the good thing. So it's a nice end to that episode. Very good episode, and very like exciting to watch something like this in like the modern era where it's like, wow, that right? Like, this is excellent. Like, they dealt with this whole like the racism thing like 1,000 times better than like seasons upon seasons of garbage and slop and all this stuff coming out in the last like 5-6 years. So like one episode, like
Just like absolutely crushed it. Like everything, like mixed race, if you will, like half white or half Italian, half black, because Italians aren't white. And then, the blacks, slavery, like they dealt with so much stuff, like police brutality, everything. It was incredible. All right. So that wraps up episode 9, I think. So next episode, it starts off with a battle. Finally, we're having immortal battles. Super good. So they fight. It's McLeod and this jabroni, and they're at a theme park or whatever. And then this guy rolls up in a Corvette, and then the guy pushes McLeod down, the guy he's fighting, and then runs over the guy who was driving the Corvette, and the guy tosses something off into the distance or whatever. And then he drives off. Duncan runs down and tries to resuscitate the guy, but he's dead. So later on, he's at the funeral. He meets the mother. He's the only one there. The mother talks about, she's from Scotland as well. She's from the Highlands. And so they chit chat a little bit. She's grateful that he's there because he was the last one alive. And then we meet this blonde chick and her dad, and they apparently run some sort of media empire or something together. And so Duncan goes to talk with them because the mother, when he talks to the mother, he's very, he wants to find out what's going on and how this immortal guy is related to the whole situation and whatnot. And so he goes to talk to Hairdinger or whatever his fucking name is, and the daughter's there. And the daughter talks about how her and Tommy were friends and yada yada yada. And Duncan's just trying to figure out what's going on and what he was working on. And Richie meanwhile heads off to the newspaper area, and no one knows about this guy at all. They know about him, and he's definitely getting paid. He has on payroll, but he never worked there, so he's an investigative journalist who was off doing his own thing, and so that's kind of sketchy. So then Duncan heads over to the guy's place in the evening because the daughter invites him, and the guy's super suspicious. He did a background check on McLeod and all this stuff, and then the daughter comes in and she's super sweet. And if you've watched TV for more than 5 minutes, you know that she is the fucking bad guy, and that the dad is just kind of an asshole. So. And so they mention this apartment that Tommy was living in, who's the dead guy. And so Duncan goes over there, and 2 of the bodyguards of the old man are there, and they get into a fight. And then Duncan has to torture a guy. Essentially, he takes one of the bodyguards and hangs him out the window and threatens to throw him out of this 5-story building, so he'll fall to his death unless he tells him more information. So he learns more about the boss man, and he sent him over here because he didn't trust him, and he's concerned for his life. He's just paranoid, essentially. And so we learned that, again, it just kind of reinforces that he's not really the person in charge of this thing. Meanwhile, Duncan's also trying to figure out the relation of this other guy. And then right after he, investigates that dude, we see her hooking up with this guy. So she's, paying him, but they're also, fucking on the side. And he's, really rough with her, which she's super into because she's, a Vassar girl, and that's how they are. Anyway, so they scheme, and they end up getting the old man inside a car and then blowing it up, and then now she inherits everything. And then Duncan comes to confront her, and she's gets the bodyguard to come in, and she bashes him upside the head. And so then the bodyguard takes him and hangs him out the window and tosses him to his death, right? Because he needs to take care of it. Meanwhile, a little bit later, Duncan recovers, obviously. Then the girl and the guy, she's trying to wrap up loose ends. So he comes over to her place, and she's drinking, and he's drinking, and they're having a good time. And then she pulls out a gun and shoots him. And he's I'll be back for you. And she's sure you will, you dumbass. And then she's tee-hee. And then she starts drinking. And of course, he's an immortal, so he gets up. The guy who set the bomb and killed Tommy and all that stuff. And then he kills her. So later on, after Duncan recovers, him and Richie are at the amusement park, and they're looking around trying to figure out what Tommy had here. Oh, also on the side, the mom and Duncan keep meeting up and just chit-chatting about the Highlands and about Tommy and stuff. And at some point, she's his lawyer called and he gave me a safety deposit key, and inside the safety deposit key was $200,000, but I don't know what to do with it. And he's go back to the Highlands. That's what you want to do. And she's I don't know if it's ill-gotten gains, or how could he be making this on a newspaper reporter? And Duncan's well, invest it, and then you can always give it back to whoever, right? Don't worry about it. And so she goes and does that. Anyway, so then Duncan and Richie finally find the bag he tossed all the way at the beginning, which had information. It had a gun in it, and then it had information about some of the shady dealings that were going on, right? So he was going to bust the whole thing wide open, apparently. And that's why he had to die. So, and then Brotown, the other immortal, shows up, and then Richie and Duncan and that guy like jaw jack for a little bit, and then Richie steps off because it's it's part of the immortal code is one-on-one fights, and Duncan beats the shit out of this guy. We have a secondary fun little battle in this amusement park, this time at night, and they go through everything, and then finally Duncan kills him, and like ta-da. So then Duncan takes all the information that Tommy had in his briefcase and like finishes writing up the story and submits it, and then it gets published, and it talks about like the death pact or the murder pact between the mother or the father and the daughter. And he shows it to the mom and is like, this is where you got the money from, blah, blah, blah. So it's all yours. And she's so grateful. And then she heads back to the Scottish Highlands. And yeah, that wraps up that episode. So now we get to meet our friendly Irish bloke. I think this is the first Irish guy we meet. Sully, right? Typical Sully. You know, get more stereotypical Irish name if you're not doing like Flanagan. Anyway, Sullivan O'Brien, or his freaking name is. He is a boxing guy. So the episode starts off, we see like a boxing match, super fun or whatever. We then get Duncan come. Duncan's at like this fight. He's talking to this guy. We meet some shady shysters. I guess that's redundant. He meets some shysters. These shysters are trying to get Sullivan's like boxing guy that he's training up to work for them or to be managed by them instead of Sullivan. But you know, they like work their way up. We get like a whole series of like comments about how like Sullivan like spent his, you know, he like found this guy in like the gutter and like helped him, and they're like a team and working together and all that stuff. So we got like the boxing stuff going on, right, with this guy. It's like young, handsome Draco Malfoy looking dude. And then on the side, we also have Sullivan and Duncan. They go out to like a sports bar and meet this like very attractive blonde chick. And Sullivan kind of like gets super nervous and quiet, and we find out that Sullivan has always had a problem with girls, and despite being hundreds of years old, he's still like he still can't like get it up. It's so this is kind of like is it called the Man of La Mancha? Ooh. Sorry. Sorry, my brakes like did not stop. It's raining outside. Anyway, yeah, what in the world? Tread issues. Okay, sorry about that. Anyway, so we got this whole situation like on Man of La Mancha, which if you're not familiar with that story, I think it's Man of La Mancha. I could be missaying that. But there's a story about a guy who is like kind of ugly because he's got a big nose and he's short, but he's like a wordsmith. Like he's very eloquent and very charming and very charismatic and stuff, and a great sword fighter. And then he has like a friend who is in love with this woman. They're both in love with this woman, but the other guy's like a younger guy, and he's like very handsome, but he's like stupid when it comes to words and stuff. And so the ugly guy like helps him charm this woman, but it's like killing his heart or whatever. Anyway, so that's not exactly what's going on here. What's going on here is kind of the story where it's like Sullivan is very bad with women, and so he asks Duncan for help, and Duncan like laughs at him, is like, I know, man, you just got to figure it out, like grow the F up. And then at some point, we find out that Charlie is like a ladies' man, and he's always hanging out with these hot babes and going out with them and whatnot. And so then Duncan kind of passes Sullivan off to Charlie, and so Charlie and Sullivan work on him becoming like being able to like just talk to this girl, which is like, you know, the bare minimum needed like for conversation. And it goes, you know, and so Charlie's able to help Sullivan like say hi and do some other stuff, but at some point he kind of gives up because like, this is insane. Meanwhile, while this is going on, we get like a backdrop of like back in the day when Sullivan and Duncan were like first hanging out. There was like a boxing match, and we find out that Sullivan's kind of a shyster, right? So he went and he's like, oh, I want you to fight this guy who's like a famous boxer. And Duncan's like, I'm not going to fight that guy. And he's like, you know, you can beat him. It's like, yeah, but I don't want to get beat up, and like blah, 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 blah. And he's like, come on, man, it'll be like $1,000. And it's like $1,000 in like 1890s money or whatever, which is like $1 million now. It's not that much. But it's like, wow, $1,000. That'd be great. So they're kind of jaw-jacking about it. So we get some of that, and we go back and forth between that and what's going on now. And then we come to find out that this girl, so her brother who's at this like sports bar where she works as well, he owes a lot of money to like the shysters, and the shysters essentially are using her as an escort to help pay off his debt, and it's a whole shady thing. And so Sullivan like finds out about this, and then he goes ahead and like kills the two guys. And then we find out that he's done this before. This is like a modus operandi. He likes like women and some humans, but like most humans he's like whatever, and he's just going to do what he wants. And then Duncan's like filled with the spirit of like justice or whatever, so he's really upset that Sullivan would like take the law into his own hands or whatever and do this stuff. And it comes to a point where he ends up killing his own boxing guy, because the boxing guy is going to like leave him. And then it's less, we find out it's Sullivan, with Sullivan it's less about fighting injustice in the world. It's like people trying to like not do what he wants, and when he gets like very upset, like a petulant child, and if like he doesn't get exactly what he wants, he's gonna like kill them, right? He's gonna go to the most extreme. And so at some point Sullivan's he's like cured his inability to talk to women. It's kind of bad writing, actually, despite all the good writing in the show. And because all of a sudden he's like having a very deep, detailed conversation about him and the girl like each other and how they should run off together, and she doesn't know. And then Duncan shows up, he's like, Sullivan. And then so they go and they fight, and he ends up killing Sullivan. And then Duncan meets up with the girl later, not to get some, don't worry about it. And they have a conversation about how her and her brother are gonna like move out of here, that like the guy's disappeared, so like her brother needs to like stop getting involved with all this like gambling or whatever he's doing to get all this debt. And so they're gonna head back to like Omaha out of Gotham City or whatever. And Duncan's like, that's a good idea. And here's something Sullivan wanted you to have. He had to go away, and you're never gonna see him again. So bye. This next episode gets pretty spicy. It involves Richie heavily, and that's for a good reason, because this is going to be his like swan song for a while. I don't remember if he ever comes back, but essentially the way it works is at some point in the beginning of the episode, Richie and Duncan run into this. They like help this girl named, I'm going to say Laura, who is like on the run from like this group of like hillbillies or whatever. And no, she's on the run from like a lawman, and we find out this lawman, Marco, I think is his name. Sorry, it's like blending episodes. I watched a couple in a row. The lawman Marco. Okay, so she's on the run, and she looks disheveled, and she's talking. She tells him how this crazy guy is like chasing after her, and she didn't do anything wrong. She was like just trying to like self-defend herself, and like her husband was abusive and all this stuff. But this Marco guy is like, he is like the spirit of justice. He will like get justice no matter what, even if justice is not just, because he's like convicts innocent men or whatever. And we know this because we get a flashback. So the flashback for Duncan in this episode centers heavily on, I'm trying to remember his name. He has like a buddy who was like loosely involved according to like the friends. And we never get like a firm answer on like one way or the other, but essentially there was like a train robbery and some people got killed, and then this lawman's been like taking dudes into justice. And we find out that this friend of Duncan's in like the Wild West of America, like the 18th century, was his brother and his like group of like his like gang of friends, and then he was just there on like a horse or something, or he was just like he like looked out for like when the train showed up. Like he wasn't involved in any of like the shooting or the actual robbery, but he was like loosely attended to. And that this guy is like currently engaged and trying to get married and like move on with his life, and it's been like 10 years or something. But this Marco guy is immortal, so he doesn't forget. So he's out here being like a marshal trying to track this guy down, and then Duncan and him like are at odds. They like argue a lot, and Duncan like protects his friend. But at some point his friend like, and this is in like 3 chunks, right? I'm just kind of summing up the whole past so you get an idea of who this Marco guy is. So then this guy, Duncan keeps telling him that he needs to like have a conversation with him or like let him go because it's been 10 years and like he says he's innocent or whatever, and like he didn't kill anybody. And then Marco keeps being like, no, he needs to go. He can say that before a judge or whatever. And it's like, dude, this guy's trying to like do whatever and yada yada yada. Eventually they get into like a shootout, not Duncan, but the kid and Marco kills him, and then Duncan's like really upset about the whole situation. So going back to the present, we never find out if this kid was like telling the whole truth, half the truth, or none of the truth. But going back to the present, we get like a kind of similar situation where this girl is like, oh, I don't know why he's chasing after me, whatever. And then we slowly find out that like, oh, I'm escaping like my husband. He was like very abusive, and this guy's just trying to drag me back. So she's lying, obviously, because she keeps changing her story. And then it's like, well, yeah. And then it finally like Marco is like, do you realize why I'm going after this chick? And Duncan's like, yeah, because her husband wants her back. And he's like, no, he killed her, or she killed him. And then it's like, what? And then she's like, oh yeah, I did kill him. That's right. I totally forgot about that or something. But it was totally self-defense and whatnot because he was abusive and yada, yada, yada. Anyway, so Richie is, of course, he likes a sexy blonde, and so here we go. She's not even that attractive. Like, he could do much better. Anyway, so he keeps protecting her and like hiding her out from Marco, but at some point they're getting like chased, and then I think Marco like hits her with his car, I think it's by accident, it seems, and kills her. And then Richie's like, I will kill you. And so then Marco's like, you gotta, I'm gonna kill the crap out of you. You've never killed anybody, and like you barely know how to sword fight or whatever. And Duncan's like, this is a very bad idea. He's gonna kill you. Like, this is not how you're gonna go about this. And then Duncan gets like really butthurt because there's like a whole thing with like this woman, like you barely know this woman. Like, why are you getting so involved? Like, why are you threatening your like you're willing to like give up your life for like nothing, essentially, for some nobody who's just like, I mean, all, mortals all die and whatnot. And, like, you think you're in love, but that's because you're like 18 still. Like, you're like the youngest immortal around. And then Richie gets like super butthurt about that, and so he's like, no, I'm gonna do it. And so him and Marco fight, and then Duncan's just kind of watching. And Richie like beats Marco because Marco like steps in a hole or something, and, like drops his sword or whatever. And then Richie's like, oh, okay, cuts his head off. And then Duncan, who is very disapproving of this whole situation, tells Richie they can't be like living together because now that he's like killed an immortal and felt the quickening, it's like he's now ready for like the outside world, and so he's got to let that like baby bird fly. And so with that, Richie leaves. And like I said, it's been a long time since I watched this stuff, and I watched it like on TV, so I don't remember exactly when like episodes were airing or whatnot. But I feel like I want to have a discussion now because I've kind of mentioned arcs and how there's like these kind of succinct arcs and whatnot. And I feel like the second season is a little more haberdash. Like, for example, I don't remember if Charlie's even in this episode, right? And then there's like whole episodes before this where Richie's like not around at all. So I feel like the order of episodes as they were syndicated is not the correct order, and that kind of messes with like my arc theory, because you have all these episodes with like Charlie that are just doing him and Duncan, and then you interspersed, you have these episodes with Richie like learning how to be an immortal and training and doing his own thing, and sometimes Charlie's there and sometimes he's not. And like Charlie's been there since like when Richie became an immortal, Charlie was there with like they immediately moved into like this thing. And so I could see like the writers, because generally they're pretty good, writing like kind of two separate arcs. Like it seems like this is definitely like the end of the Richie arc, but the Richie arc has been like broken up in the syndicated release. Because there should have been 3 or 4 episodes of just like Richie being kind of like the main character or main side character, and then we go back with like the Irish lady and everything, and then we go back to where it became more of like the Charlie Duncan show, where like Richie's not around at all in those episodes. Because then we focus heavily on Richie or on Charlie for the next 2 episodes, and then we kind of like wrap that arc up, right? And so it kind of makes it a little more difficult because I didn't watch this whole season in like one go, because I would have come to this conclusion and like broken these episodes up. But I may try to go through and just kind of mess with these episodes. But I'm doing all this stuff like real time because I'm a professional, and and so we're probably just gonna ride with it. But I want to make that comment here that like I still feel like there's 2 distinct arcs here. I feel like that so far in season 2, there's we're on like episode 12 now. There's been 3 distinct arcs. Like each arc is a couple 3 to 4 episodes. With like the the Tessa dying arc, which is the very beginning, and then we have like the Richie being in a new immortal arc, and then we move to like the Charlie arc. So all the episodes I talk about in this video with like Charlie being the main character and being like involved with stuff happens like after Richie's gone, it seems, because Richie never comes up in those episodes. And so I almost feel like they filmed all this stuff too, like they filmed it out of order as well, or that they filmed it in order, but then they it wasn't like they brought the guy who plays Richie back just for this episode. I mean, they might have, just because of like, it could have been a thing with like actors' schedules and stuff. Like they finally got him in so they could film this episode, and then because they're back in the day, they're releasing episodes like every week, and like they're not necessarily filming these like all together and then releasing them like one at a time. Like they're kind of, sometimes they're filming stuff or like finishing up episodes like the week that they like release. So anyway, so that's the end of the Richie arc. Will he come back? I don't know. Guess we'll see. All right, so then we head back over to the Charlie arc for episode 13. This one's kind of funny. It's a little like confusing, and this is why I messed up, because I watched this episode and previous episode a little bit, because they both involve like women that are being like chased by like another man that Duncan has to like resolve the issue essentially. And so in my head they kind of blurred, but this one is different. So Charlie and Duncan are just out camping like bros, just broing it out, having a good old bro time, right? And then there's this woman. Did she get into a car wreck or something nearby? I don't know. For some reason, she's like in the woods. Let me see if I wrote it down in my notes. Charlie and a distressed young woman after a car crashes. Yeah. So they hear like a car crash. They go like check it out, and it's this woman. It's like this Indian woman and she's got a baby, and she's like, they're like, what are you doing? Like, we gotta take you to the hospital. No, I can't go to the hospital. They're gonna get me. Who's gonna get you? Oh, my husband, it died, and my father-in-law, or my husband's, or the father of my child, like the grandfather of my child, wants like to get the son, doesn't want me to have him, and he's chasing after me, and he's got guns, and he's like, we're out in the country and whatnot, outside of Gotham, and then we kind of switch back and forth, and we see that there's this guy, and he wants like the kid back right now, and there's a whole scene at the beginning with like her like kidnapping the kid essentially out of this guy's like house, right, which seems sus. But anyway, so then we have like a fun adventure, like they're traveling through the woods and trying to protect her and help her get around, and Charlie's like, remember, he's like a seal, I want to say, or he was a seal, and then Duncan's like an immortal seal. It's like 55 seals all built into one, and so they're having like some fun. We find out that this guy, I think his name's Avery, he has like a mine, and that his brother, who also works for him doing the mine stuff, he found out that there was some like leakage of like the mercury, I want to say, out into like the river, and that affected like this woman's child, and then the child died of like mercury poisoning because I guess like dun dun dun, she kidnapped this other guy's child because his wife like died in childbirth, and so there's no relation between the two except that Avery owns the mine that like leaked out the whatever mercury. I'm just going with mercury out into the water supply or something, which is what the baby drank. This girl's like Shauna or something. Shauna's babies and killed, and so she wants a baby because she's like lost her mind because she lost her baby, and so she went and stole his baby to like for recompense. And the whole time, like Avery has no idea any of this pollution stuff is going on, or like the leakage or whatever, because his brother's like trying to hide it up. And at some point, like there's a guy with his brother. Like, so there's his brother's involved, and then there's another guy, and I think the brother gets killed by like the other guy. So there's like the brother knows, and if I remember correctly, I got a little confused by who was who, because it's all a bunch of just like white dudes in like similar coats in like the woods. So we're just gonna go with his brother knew about it, and so did like this other guy that was working for him, or maybe there's two brothers. And so, but they didn't tell Avery because the mine, something profitable, and they didn't want to like close down the mine because then what are they going to do for a living or something. And so they didn't tell him. And then one of the guys like, we got to tell him, this is like messed up. Like, he needs to know what's really going on. The other guy kills him. And then he says, hey, those guys who are stealing your baby, they killed him. And so that makes Avery even more mad, right? It's another one of these things. It's kind of like that. I feel like we had a similar thing going on in like a previous episode as well. But anyway, so all those shenanigans are like taking place right now, and so we continue the chase, and then eventually Duncan and Charlie like find out the truth, and then Duncan has to like, he's like talking to Avery, he's talking to the woman, like, you can't just like steal someone's baby, that's not right. And she's like, he killed my baby, and it's like, he didn't even know, like, you're mad at the wrong person, and like, still, even if you did, like, stealing their baby is not okay, like, you gotta go to the police, or saying, we can't go to the police, we're in the woods, it's a lot of that kind of stuff, right? But eventually he's able to successfully get the baby back to Avery, and then Avery is willing to like not press charges because it's like tragedy all around, and it's all very sad. And then him and Charlie like talk about how this whole situation is like way fucked up, and so and that they were glad they were able to make it so it wasn't like even more fucked up than it already is. So that's good. All right, so now we get our first two-part. Yeah, is it our first? Yeah, there's actually two-part episodes, or two-part storylines. And this one's big, and it kind of wraps up the Charlie arc and leads us into the next arc, which is like the Paris arc, part two, if you will. All right, so this one's called Unholy Alliance, and it deals with our old chum, the robber guy who used gas and shit to like kill immortals, Xavier Saint. We'll just go Xavier. It's Xavier St. Clair or something. And then dun dun dun, guess who survived? Duncan's like previous attempts at murder. That's right, James Horton, the Watcher, or as he self-stylizes himself, the Hunter, right? Which is like the rogue organization within the Watchers that is trying to kill all immortals because they're all evil. But for some reason, he's going to use Xavier because Xavier is also evil, so evil helps each other, I guess. And they're going to team up just to kill like as many immortals as possible, and then Horton will like deal with Xavier later, right? And for part of this like two-part series, I thought James had like come back as an immortal, because sometimes he does that thing when like they're quickening, or no, they're sensing other immortals. They're like look over, like I don't think he ever did it by himself, but I got kind of confused, so I had to like double check. But so we don't really get too many flashbacks. We get flashbacks, but the flashbacks are like flashbacks to previous episodes dealing with both Horton and Xavier. So the way it goes, I'm just going to talk about both episodes here because it's pretty much the same. We start off in the U.S. and we see a series of immortals being killed, and the way they're getting killed is they're getting shot by like dudes with machine guns, and then Xavier's coming over and like cutting their heads off. Now, why, you may ask, does Xavier need to be involved once James seems to have this operation kind of like on lock? I'm not exactly sure. Maybe his connections, or maybe like his protection, or something, or they both want revenge on Duncan MacLeod like so bad they're willing to like work together, which is the only allowance. It doesn't make a lot of sense in my head why, if James survived, Horton survived, he wouldn't just continue doing what he was doing before, right? And there's some back and Joe Dawson, the Watcher guy, plays a large role in this, obviously, because he's they're like brother-in-laws. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's how it works. Like James married Joe's sister, I think. You know, they work closely together in the organization before Horton like went off the deep end. So he's around, and we get a lot of, there's a lot of talk with him. So we see a bit of that. We see Duncan and Joe going at it, as in like with words, and then kind of like Duncan and Charlie get attacked by Xavier and his crew in the dojo, right? Yes, I'm trying to remember, because at some point Charlie gets like killed. He doesn't get killed. He gets like shot up real good, but I think it happens later. Yeah. So the dojo gets shot up, but then like they're able to like escape out of there without I think that there's that too much injury. And then we meet like Robin Delaney, I think is her name. She's a CID. So CID is Criminal Investigation Department. There's also CID Counterintelligence Division. Or no, I think it's Counterintelligence Department and Criminal Investigative Division, if I remember correctly. It's an army. It's the Army's branch of. Most people have heard of NCIS. The Army's version of that is CID. So she's like a CID officer, and I don't know if she's just like in the Guard or something. Because I don't know why she's so heavily involved in like this investigation, but she is, and she's a cute blonde chick. So obviously Duncan's got a thing, and so they kind of have some back and forth and like some flirtation and whatnot. And I can't remember if they bang. I think they do at some point. But she's trying to do like her mortal side of like, why are all these people getting their heads cut off, and like what is all this like shootings that are going on, and then he's like trying to ignore her as best he can. At some point he goes to like, he figures out where Dawson tells him, oh no, so one of the other Watchers tells Joe and Duncan where Horton and Xavier are going to be, but it's actually a trap. And so he goes there and he gets like shot. Yes, he gets shot. And then I don't remember they didn't finish him off in the dojo. I don't remember exactly what happened with that. But no, so like this warehouse, and so Duncan gets shot, and then Xavier's coming up to like behead him, and then Duncan's like kind of fighting him, and then Charlie is there as well because Duncan told him not to come, but he came anyway. And so he runs out so that Duncan doesn't get shot again, or doesn't get, he like causes a distraction, or like the police, and then like Robin like shows up, and so Charlie got shot up real good by Horton, and then Horton and Xavier like piece out of there, and Duncan like jumps down like an elevator shaft. And then for the rest of like the two episodes, Charlie's like, we go back and forth with him like being alive or not, but then he ends up like surviving, but he's going to be like pretty injured. And then and then Duncan so Charlie's able to recover enough that he can walk, but he's never going to like walk the same or whatever. And then Duncan's like, I got to go to Paris because that's where Xavier and Horton like fled to, because like the CID's like on them like real tight and hard. And so they go off to do that. Oh no, so they go off to Paris. So then Duncan's like, I gotta go to Paris, and he's, Charlie, you stay here. I left everything in your name. Like, just keep the gym going as best you can. He's like, what am I gonna do with this thing? I got shot up. Like, we can't, like, this dojo doesn't like function that well anymore. And he's like, just do the best you can, brother. And so then Duncan heads over to Paris, right? When he gets to Paris, we get some like funny shenanigans. Like his barge is missing, and someone's like, "Oh yeah, the barge that was sitting here, I guess legally this whole time, just like anchored, is like over there because there was like the river flooded or something, and so they had to move it." And he goes in there and meet, I think his name's Maurice, who's this like charming French man, who's just like essentially a homeless bum who's just been like living in Duncan's like barge while he's gone. And he's, he helps out because there's a whole thing with like Duncan trying to investigate and discover where Xavier is at. And he knows Xavier loves like this golden caviar, but like no one has it because it's like illegal or something, or super expensive. And then Maurice is like, oh, I know where you can get golden caviar. And so that helps him track down Xavier and Horton at the end. And then also like Delaney shows up so that they can fuck some more, and she can continue her investigation like in another country, which is like so illegal I can't even like imagine how that was justified. But it was. So so we get some of that, and then we also get and then Joe's there, of course, because Joe's. And then at some point, Duncan is having a conversation with Joe. I don't remember if this happens. It happens some point in this episode about like shenanigans that are going on and how it's like, you knew Horton was alive, and Joe's like, no, I didn't. And then something, and then we had like a funeral, and then Duncan goes to investigate and finds out that the guy's not buried in like the mausoleum or whatever, and he calls Joe out, and then he sees Joe talking to James at some point, James Horton. And anyway, but then Joe has to like prove his loyalty or prove that he's not like working with James because Duncan's like had enough of his bullshit and whatnot. And so all that's super fun. And finally, Duncan's able to track down Xavier and Horton again. And then he's like, oh yeah, and this whole time, part of the reason Xavier's so upset is because, well, last time they fought, he cut his hand off. Anyway, so they go back and forth, and then Duncan and him finally fight. And then Duncan finally kills Xavier for good, and James like runs off, and then Duncan like runs after him after he takes care of all that business and gets the quickening and whatnot. And then like James is like on a barge or like a boat, like taking off, and he's like, haha, nani nani na na. And then Joe like shoots him, and he falls into the river. And they're like, now he's dead for good, or is he? I guess we'll find out. So then Duncan goes and like fucks Robin again one more time, and then it says they can't be together because he has to go do stuff and she's got to go back to the army or something, and she's disappointed about that, but he's like, just enjoy the time that we had and forget it ever happened. It's like, cool story. Then him and Maurice are, I guess, best friends forever now. Petty. So exciting and so fun. Okay, so we're still here. Obviously, it's the Paris arc, part 2. Part 2! And in this one, Joe's also just hanging out and around and about. We don't see Maurice in this, which is unfortunate. He was delightful. But we do get a vampire. Not really. It's another immortal who, like, drains people's blood to make them think there's a vampire because it's, like, his calling card or something. Anyway, we start off, Duncan, we start off with a guy, he's, like, swimming, and then he gets, like, killed, right? And his blood gets drained. And so then we follow that to a funeral where this guy, Duncan knew this guy, and he had something to do with like rock and roll or like music production or something in Petty. And he talks to this girl who's like his daughter of this guy who owned like whatever business or like, you know, he owned like a record label or something. I don't know. There's like music somehow involved because there's like talk about rockers, talk about singers, musicians that is kind of like tangential to what's going on. It's like there. And then the immortal guy in the present, I forget his name. Let me see if I wrote it down. He's like in a band or somehow related to this as well. This guy's name, Nicholas Ward. Okay. So Nicholas Ward. And then we actually spent a significant portion of this episode, which is great, in like old timey, I want to say England. Because Duncan was like making like business deals with these guys who own these like companies in like England, and they were trying to like wheel and deal and all this stuff. And then these two guys got like vampired, and one guy was like super concerned about a vampire, and then that guy had a daughter who was married to this who was going to get married to Nicholas Ward. And this is where Duncan met him the first time, right? And the guy was kind of sketchy, but Duncan was like, oh, whatever. And so this Ward guy used some sort of like cane thing, which had like, essentially he just like plugged it into someone's neck so it looked like fangs, and then it like drained their blood, you know, like a syringe or whatever, so that it, you know, because the whole point was that he knew this guy was like very scared of vampires, and so he wanted to like play up on that to like get him to be even more scared or something, because he enjoys tormenting people before he kills them. But his whole thing as a immortal is that he likes to marry into wealth, but then he doesn't want to wait, which is bizarre because he's immortal. And so instead of like waiting like a non-crazy person, he like sets up the situation where he can like get like the owner, which is a man, killed, and then he marries their daughter, and so she inherits the wealth, and then he kills, and then he marries the daughter, and then he gets her killed or kills her, or the vampire kills her, and then he inherits everything, and that's how he like lives his like extravagant lifestyle. So we spent a lot of time just kind of like with Duncan investigating that in like England, and like I would say like usually the flashbacks are maybe like at max like a third of the episode, and this one was like half the episode, I feel like. So Ward's back, he's doing it again. Him and Duncan have some like conversations about the value of human life and like what's he doing and like who really cares and stuff like that. And him and Duncan obviously are like at opposite points of view when it comes to this situation, particularly because the woman he's engaged to marry, and he has to find this out by doing like all sorts of shenanigans because he's like, Ward's going to do the same thing again. I got to figure it out. He goes to Joe at some point just to ask him, and Joe's like, I don't know. And so he goes to like the county office, and he's like, hey, I'm looking I'm here for my buddy's, like, I heard my buddy was getting engaged, but I can't figure out where he lives, so I just wanted to know if I could look up like his fiance, and maybe she'll know because I can look her up. And so he goes to like the county office in France or whatever, and like a lady who speaks like very clearly no French is like, oh yeah, fella, let me tell you, old chum. And so she tells him who the lady is, and it's the lady who's the son or the daughter of the guy that got killed. And then, so Duncan finally puts it all together, and he goes to like talk to her, and then he confronts Ward. And they're about to get like married at like the courthouse, and he shows up. And he's like, hey, I got to talk to you. And Ward's like, I'll be right back, my dear. Let me just take care of this business for a second. And so he goes, and then they have a badass like sword fight. And he kills that motherfucker. And he comes back and he's like, hey, I'm so sorry. Your fiance had to like jet out of the country. Something very like family and dire happened. But maybe, maybe he'll come back someday. Who knows? Whatever. Is there anything I can do to help you out? And she's like, oh, no, I'll just be sad and be okay. And he's like, okay, well, if there's anything I can do. We pick up in an embassy of some sort. It seems like it is Romania based on the conversation that's had. And this president guy is trying to end some war, but then is like, and he's with some prostitute, which is very funny because that's like there was a Romanian president. It was like very into his mistress. It was like a quote unquote national scandal at some point. But people were just like, he's a good president. Who cares? Anyway, so that's my take from not Romania, but it's just kind of funny. It was like reminded me of that. I don't know if it's supposed to be based on that guy or not. But what is important is this guy's there he's in Paris for like a peace talk with somebody else. And then the somebody comes up. Oh, the head of security, that's what he is. This straight guy. He's the main antagonist in this episode. He comes up and he talks about how, like, hey, we had a deal, you're not following through the deal. And then the president's like, I'm tired of war. And he's like, well, I'm tired of you being alive. And he shoots him. And then he gets the prostitute to come back in, and he, like, gets her to grab the gun, and then he shoots her. So it looks like she killed him, like an assassination attempt. We then skip ahead to this girl who's, like, a investigative reporter, and she's trying to get into, like, the ballet, but all the tickets are sold out. And it's like, why is she so interested in the ballet? I don't know. Duncan comes up. They, like, bump into each other, and, like, and obviously he's going to fuck her by the end of the episode, which spoiler alert, I guess. Then that's the France arc. The Paris arc is just like banging chicks, banging blonde chicks, because she's blonde. She's not very attractive, to be completely honest. So I'm like, man, but I mean, whatever. Got to get it in. So then Drake shows up with like his cronies, and then she tries to like investigate him, and then he's like, get out of here. And then Duncan and him like see each other, and then like this old man tries to pull a gun and shoot Drake named Eli, and then Duncan stops him, and then later on he's like walking out of there, and the lady like accosts him because she's like, oh, Drake something something. And he's like, I don't want to talk to you. And she's like, oh, I don't remember her name. Bang whore number 3 or whatever. And then he's like, I'm Duncan McLeod. And so then she invites him up to have sex like immediately, and he's like, no, I'm not that kind of guy, which is kind of a lie. He's just not that into it at this point. But later on he's like, fuck it, whatever. So then he meets up with Eli for whatever reason. Eli's like, I'm going to tell you why I want to kill him so bad. And he tells him this like sad story about his family in Romania, and how the guy, like, he was part of like the resistance movement against like the Soviets. And then so then Drake got like his family and told him to turn everybody over, or he was going to kill them all, and then he like killed them all and hung them in front of a store. So Eli's been like hard charging for like to assassinate this guy for a long time. Duncan keeps telling him, don't do it. And then he's like, why don't you do anything about it? I'm like, why would this random stranger do anything about it? And like Eli's excuse is like, you have a lot of hate in your heart for this man. And Duncan does. So we go to the past. So Duncan was just like hanging out in Russia or Romania or somewhere. Like some like Eastern European place. And there was some like countess that he was like close friends with, and there was like fucking Little John, like this giant of a man with a huge fucking sweet ass beard, and they were just chopping wood. Anyway, so this countess ends up getting picked up because it's convenient for like the movement to have like a scapegoat of someone to like kill because of the bourgeoisie or something. Anyway, so Duncan like breaks his way into Drake's place. They realize they're immortal. He's about to cut the guy's head off, and the guy's like, I'll make you a deal because this family's like already on the way to the execution chamber. I'll stop the execution like immediately, or it's going to be like a firing squad. If you promise me that we'll never fight each other unless we're like the last two immortals alive. And so Duncan makes that deal. So the lady gets away, and he gives her some diamonds or whatever. So that is why Duncan can't do anything in this situation. And throughout the episode, we keep having like arguments with Drake, with the not arguments, but he has like discussions with Drake about Drake's like an asshole, but Duncan like promised not to do anything, and Duncan's an honorable man. And then Eli telling him to stop being an honorable man because that guy's an asshole. And then the lady trying to get information from everybody and failing at it across the board. They bring the vice president in, and then they're going to set him up because he's going to agree to the peace talks as well instead of staying in war like Drake wants. But then Duncan kind of like gives up on his honor. It's like a strange message for this episode, but I guess like it's more honorable to like kill a monster than to like keep a promise with a monster is the idea, which the anime Monster, which I did a 6-hour video of, did a much better job of making this point. But I feel like in this it's kind of like like whatever. I just don't feel like it upped the stakes as much as I thought it would. Okay, then we have a fun shot of like Maurice and him like drinking and like talking about sad times or good times or enjoying times with friends when things are sad or whatever, and it's like Maurice high fives all around. So anyway, so then Draco Malfoy. Drake invites this dude or the lady to come talk to him, and then he drugs him up, and he's going to use her in some sort of scandal against the vice president to get like a new vice president. Duncan finds out about it, finds out it's like going on at like the airport. He goes over there. The guy's like, "What? You're going to break your code?" And Duncan's like, "For you, yes." And so then they have a sweet ass battle in like a hangar of like a plane area. And Duncan's able to finally kill this dude, and then he dresses up like him so he can sneak onto the plane where the newspaper reporter is and the guy and the thugs, and like beat up the thugs and rescue the girl. And then we get like she writes her like report about the guy, and she's all bummed out because he like quote unquote escaped. And Duncan's like, "Man, I wouldn't be so sure about that." And then they fuck at the end. This next episode takes a fun little trip. Not a trip at all, but it's slightly different than like the normal Highlander affair, which is kind of fun. It's not that much different. So Duncan MacLeod, there's like some shenanigans with like a stolen sarcophagus or something, and Duncan of course intercedes himself at some point. He was still in Paris, still in the Paris arc, I think for the rest of this season if I remember correctly, but we'll see shortly if you're watching this video. And so when he approaches the sarcophagus, he feels the quickening, opens it up. There's an immortal inside, Nafrati or something. She is 2,000 years old. She like took some poison and buried herself with Cleopatra. She was like Cleopatra's handmaiden back in like whenever that took place. I'm not a super big Egyptian Roman historian guy. I really don't care about most of that stuff, to be completely honest. It's boring. But so she wakes up in the modern world, but it's not like she's like a new immortal. She's been immortal. It's like a long time ago, and she's just kind of like hanging out. Anyway, she's got some beef with Marcus Constantine, who is he was a Roman general around this time period as well. Not Marcus Aurelius, the lover of Cleopatra, but apparently Naphtali, I think that's her name. Neferati and him were like lovers back in the day, and then like she was mad because she was like all about Queen Cleopatra in Egypt, and he was all about Rome, and the things he did were like for Rome. Anyway, he's like around too. He runs the museum that she was being like kept in, but I guess he didn't like realize she was in there, or he did and was just like leaving her be. Anyway, he is now like married and happily going about things. And if you notice, I'm not really talking about Duncan MacLeod. It's because he is like barely a fixture here. He's important because he's the main character of the series, obviously, and he's also the one who like gets Neferati and kind of like is the go-between between Marcus and Neferati. All the past stuff is like this fun little set they have. Which is like really dark, and it's just like it's supposed to be like ancient Egypt tomb or whatever. So we get Neferati being sad about Cleopatra killing herself because she was going to go into slavery, and then we get her and Marcus being lovers, and then fighting at some point because she's so mad that he's choosing Rome over like Egypt or some crazy nonsense. Anyway, in the modern era, she's trying to use sex to get with Duncan and get him on her side, but Duncan's not tricked by that because he's also like he's not 2,000 years old, but he's also like a 400-year-old immortal. And Marcus is like moved on, like he's like married to like a human woman, kind of like a Tessa situation, but he actually like pulled the trigger and got married before she died. Don't worry, she dies shortly because Neferati. So Duncan tries to mediate between Neferati and Marcus to get everything after he talks to both of them and gets both their sides. But of course, Neferati is like an insane person. Not because she's a woman, she's just like a crazy person. Like stuff she does is like out of the bounds crazy. Like she gets revenge by like killing this woman and then telling Marcus they're not even yet, but she's still gonna do more. And then Marcus gets like super pissed off about that whole situation, but he's like willing to like he's been around for like 2,000 years. He was like homies with Darius, and he's kind of like done with this whole thing. All he wants to do is like preserve history. Also, we get another interaction. I think we get another interaction this episode with one of like the evil watchers who comes and tries to kill Neferati, I think, at some point. I think that was in this episode. I don't remember exactly. I watched it a couple days ago. Normally I watch these and then do the videos, but no, that's not always the case. Anyway, that's not really important. So then at some point, Nephrati is she wants to go kill Marcus, and Duncan's like, no. And this is after they make sweet love for like a couple minutes. Like, it's a pretty good scene. She's hot, so excellent. She's way too like dark skinned, if you will, for like the time period of Egypt, and even like now and like all Egypt forever. But that's okay. I mean, they're working with like whatever crazy 90s or 80s like understanding of like tertiary understanding of like Egyptian lore during the Cleopatra era. But so whatever. It's not like a woke thing. Which I'll be talking a bit about more, the whole woke thing in my Chained Echoes video, which may be before or after this, but that game is very good. Probably my favorite game of the year in 2025. You can definitely see stuff where it's like, okay, I can see why people would think this is like super woke, but I would say it's not, and I'll have a treatise there about that, I'm sure. Anyway, so, okay, so then Duncan and Nephrati end up fighting because she's a lunatic, and he ends up killing her. And then him and Marcus become like friends. They're just like friends, as in like, I don't think we see Marcus again, maybe much later, but it's like, okay, cool. We have no beef, and Marcus isn't really going to fight anymore, and he's not about war, he's about preservation. So there's like really no reason for him and Duncan to like have at it. So they're like, well, maybe see you again someday, whatever. So he gains like another kind of like friend ally situation ship because he no longer wishes to fight. All right, then this next episode, we get the return of our good friend Amanda. Yeah, that's her name. This episode's very interesting. We get a lot of backlore about Amanda. It's really like an Amanda-focused episode, which, she's becoming more and more of like a predominant character in this because she's very popular. And she's so popular, like I mentioned before, she gets like her own spin-off series at some point. I gotta look and see if it's like during the 6 seasons of the regular thing, because then I would want to like intersperse it into that. Because right now I'm kind of planning on watching it after the movie, I think. But I gotta dig into that and kind of figure out some more. Anyway, so it starts off with this guy, Luther. Luther, he shows up to Rebecca, that's her name. So Rebecca is an immortal. She's got this old man husband, and they're just like hanging out, talking about, he's like, oh, I'm too old for you now. And she laughs. It's like, oh, you're never, like, get out of here. I'm like 1,000 years old or whatever. And then this Luther guy shows up and grabs the husband and puts a sword to his neck. And he's like, you will toss your sword away and let me and give me the crystal, like quote unquote crystal, or I will murder your husband. And she's finally like, fine. And so then he beheads her while he has the opportunity. And so Amanda comes to visit Duncan to talk about Rebecca's death and about like what's going on, and that she has to fight Luther, who's much stronger than she is. And I don't know how strong of an immortal she actually is. She seems like she's not super strong. And there's some like sexismos in this in some regards, where they're like in the past and in the present, Duncan like has to fight for his lady. Because she's obviously not strong enough to like fight this guy, and in the past she like wants to challenge him. Granted, in the past it makes more sense because she like is a fledgling immortal, and she's like teases Duncan about fighting, and he's like, I will not fight you, that's ridiculous. Like, anyway, so that we get some scenes in the past where we find out Amanda was like an urchin girl or something, and that she was slain, and then Rebecca found her and took her under her wing and kind of like tutored her and got her to be like the immortal that we know and love at this juncture. And so they're very close. They're like mother-daughter, just kind of like Richie and Duncan, sort of. So she's really hemmed up about the whole situation. There's also this whole like kind of subplot, or the reason Luther's being kind of a-hole is he killed Rebecca because it was like an opportunity, but he wasn't going to kill her necessarily. What he really wanted is these crystals, because apparently there is like some mythology about like whoever collects all these crystals or whatever will become the strongest immortal or whatever, which Duncan shuts down immediately as being like a myth. And then Amanda like tosses back at him that like, hey, we're like come on. Like, what are you talking about? You never know. Anyway, so Lucia's like real hell-bent on this. Rebecca had one, he had one. I'm trying to remember. It seems like Amanda had one, and then there's like maybe others, but then he's been like collecting them. And so the last ones he needs are these. Anyway, so there's like some conversation between Amanda and Duncan about like, let Duncan take care of it. She's like, no, I'm going to take care of it, I swear, blah, 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 blah. Eventually Duncan like tracks down Luther, and they just have like a chit chat about it. And he's like, you're an idiot. These crystals are nothing. And the guy's like, whatever. And it's like, do they want to fight? Nah, not really. Duncan, he doesn't like want to fight unless he like has to. So he's like, whatever, it's stupid. And he wasn't like that into Rebecca necessarily. He was like kind of an old friend, but like, I mean, they're immortals, so like people die all the time. That being said, Amanda is obviously not so much. And so she tracks down like this Luther guy has some goons. So she tracks down the goons, beats them up. And then gets hit, like calls him and is like, I'll meet you at the same place you fought Rebecca. I'm going to go there. And then she pays the goons to go like fight, or she tells Luther that on one condition he'll send the goons after McLeod to like distract him so that she can like sneak away, right? Because she's a sneakopotamus.
And so she goes and fights Luther, and then she almost dies, and then Duncan's like kind of shows up and like starts chitter chatting with them about it. And it's like obviously he can't like fight Luther because it's one-on-one fights, right? And Duncan's a very like man of his word, or man of like the rules or whatever. But he does like tempt Luther before he can kill Amanda with like the last crystal or whatever. So then they fight, and they have a pretty awesome fight, and then he ends up killing Luther and taking his head. And then him and Amanda are like hanging out in Paris and like talking. Oh, there's a bunch of scenes with like Maurice, and he's like teasing Amanda about how she's in love with Duncan, and she's like in denial about it, which is fun. Okay, yeah. So then they just kind of are walking around, and then she keeps trying to get him to go search for the rest of the crystals, and he's like, no. Traps up the episode. So this next episode starts off with like a couple running a hotel or whatever, and then the guy goes outside and gets killed, and Richie's there and he's holding his sword. Yep, Richie's back. And then the lady's like, you killed my husband, and so he gets on his motorcycle and rides off. And we see like some guy in a creepy black car like watching from a distance. So meanwhile, Duncan and homeboy Marcel or whatever are hanging out. Sorry, my windshield wipers went off. Talking about whatever when Duncan gets the vibe. And so he goes out, and then Richie's there, and he's like, oh, Duncan, I don't know what's going on, but this guy's like chasing me down. And he tells like this crazy story. We get like a mini flashback because he's only been an immortal for like a year, ? And we see that he tells this like story. Oh, he's just going around, met some girl in New Orleans, then he went to like somewhere else, went to Spain. And then this guy started chasing him around. He had some homies he was hanging out with, and they all ended up dead. And he knew it was like an immortal because he felt him, but the guy's just like taunting him or something. And so he came to Duncan to kind of get some help because he didn't know what else to do. And then, the episode's called Prodigal Son, but it's like, I don't really think Richie's like a prodigal son, to be completely honest. Anyway, so then when he got to France, then this other guy died, and he was like implicated in the whole situation. And then shortly thereafter, like the police show up, and Richie tries to make a break for it, but then he ends up going to jail. And then the lady picks him up out of a lineup. Meanwhile, Duncan is having a remembrance because they're kind of talking. Duncan's like, I think I know who this guy is, and he's not going to like fight you directly. He uses people around you. So he remembers back when he was like a Scottish guy, and Connor was like training him all the way back like in 1600 or whatever, that he met this guy like horseback, and they kind of had like a little bit of a sword fight, but the guy wanted to fight Connor, but Duncan was there. And so he had the opportunity to like kill Duncan, but he was like, oh, there's no fun in beating up young immortals, I don't care. And so he like meandered off, and that's kind of the theme that continues throughout, because he has another flashback later on, and he's like hanging out in like pre-revolutionary France, I want to say, with like, because they're wearing like the ridiculous wigs and everything, and this other immortal is like, they go to like a funeral, and Duncan talks about how he like knew this guy like his whole life from birth to grave, and it was kind of weird, and the guy's like trying to help him be like a better immortal and talking about stuff. And then they're going to go share this like fancy cognac or something. Or I don't think it was cognac. I think it was like I don't remember. It was some sort of liquor. And then like the guy again shows up. I didn't catch his name. And Duncan's like wants to fight him because he fought him before, and then the guy like laughs at him and says, I don't fight junior immortals or whatever. And the guy and his buddy's like, I'll take care of it. I'll see you at the bridge like in an hour. And so then we see Duncan like waiting all day at the bridge. He never shows up, and he doesn't drink the liquor because he's like, I hate drinking alone, right? Which is like a cute little send off. Back to the present, Duncan like finds this guy, and like Duncan is now seasoned enough to fight this guy, and so the guy tries to like fight him, and then Duncan kind of like blows him off and like takes off. He's like, I'm not gonna fight you right now, but then he agrees to like fight him later because it seems like the case against Richie is pretty strong, which to me it seems like not strong at all. It's like one lady saying she saw something, and then like there's no evidence. Like he carried his sword around, and the guy was like killed with a sword, but it's like there's no evidence or anything. And so Duncan essentially tells this guy that he wants him he'll fight him, but first he has to like get Richie out of prison. The guy's like, nope, no can do. And so Duncan pulls this like maneuver where he gets the police to like show up at like a fight where he essentially tells this guy he's going to fight him, but then instead of fighting him, he gets the police to show up, and then the guy like tries to like fight the police or whatever with his sword, and so they shoot him dead, right? But he's not really dead because he's an immortal. And so then they're examining the sword, and the sword has traces of like the manager's DNA or whatever. So clearly he's the one who killed him, and like a case closed or whatever. So Richie gets to go free.
But then like the guy obviously wakes up from the morgue and like takes the sword back, kills another guy, and like meanders on out of there. So then Duncan and Richie like sense his presence, and Richie's like, I'm gonna go get him, and Duncan's like, he would not fight you even if you went to fight him. He would just like ignore you because he doesn't care and he's not gonna like waste his time or whatever. So let me take care of it. And then he hands Richie the same bottle of liquor that his homie gave to him like in France all those years ago. And he's like, meet me at the bridge in an hour. And I'm like, oh, the show is so well written. I love it. And then Richie's like, what if you don't show up? And he's like, well, you do what you got to do and get revenge, but just be careful. Make sure you're ready for him. And then, so then Richie goes and waits at the bridge. And then Duncan goes and fights this guy. And again, we get like our badass, like shown in anime fight with the swords between the two of them. And then they fight, and then Duncan's able to overcome him, and the guy's like, see you in hell. And Duncan's like, just like cuts his head off and gets the quickening and all that. And then he heads back over to where Richie's at, and then they drink and they talk about stuff. And then Duncan's like, I haven't seen you in like a year, like what's going on? And then Richie's like, well, I thought you were mad at me. And he's like, no, I'm not mad at you. Like, you know, I can be mad at you, but like even best friends will like be mad at each other and need a break. So there's no reason to be gone for that long. And so it's like a nice, sweet little like, oh, is Richie back? We'll see. Alrighty then. So we wrap up the season 2 with a 2-parter called Counterfeit. Yeah. And it brings back some of our friendly characters and kind of wraps up the Paris arc as well. And all the stuff with Horton, finally. So part 1, now that Richie's back, he's out and about at like a carnival hanging out. Oh, actually, we start off and we get some of like the sketchy like watchers, the evil watchers and whatnot, and they are like debranding somebody, right? Because all the watchers have that like watcher tattoo, even the evil ones. And so we see a guy getting his like tattoo burned off. Okay. And he gets told to go be a hero or whatever. Anyway, so then we get Richie and he's wandering around like a carnival somewhere in Paris, and then some creepy dude like walks up to him, and then some guys like chase him through the streets, and he ends up trying to run away, but then like some shady stuff happens and he's about to get shot, and then some guy like rolls up on a motorcycle and like rescues him, and then he gets shot in the arm, and then he brings Richie back to the barge where Duncan is like very skeptical about this guy just like being there in the right place at the right time, and he notices like a burn mark where like the normal tattoos are for the watchers, and so he has a lot of questions about that, but Richie's like, no, this guy saved my life, he's my friend, yada yada yada. And most of the episode just kind of revolves around that. It revolves around Horton, yeah, this is his name, right? The bad guy watcher, Horton Hears a Who, right? Doing shady stuff in the background, setting up for the next episode, but also trying to find a way to split Richie and Duncan apart, because his greatest dream in life is to ruin Duncan MacLeod and think every day about how awesome it is that he destroyed him. Part of this is that there's some like lady serial killer or whatever that's being transported, and so he sends the watchers over to like rescue her and bring her back, and then once she's like in his clutches, he has a doctor like rearrange her face, right? Meanwhile, so Richie and Duncan are having Duncan's doing a lot of research on this guy, and this guy keeps being found to like be lying about stuff, but Richie's like, so what, people lie, like this guy saved my life, why would he do that? And then Duncan's like, you got to trust me on this. And then he has a recall of this guy in like, it seems more medieval, like prior to like the French Revolution, like more like 16, 17, early 1700s is what it seems like. But anyway, this guy, he's like, so Duncan is like in England, it seems, and he is poaching in like the King's Forest, the someone's forest, right? So it's like a Robin Hood story. And then like the sheriff of the county shows up, and then Duncan's like, all right, whatever, what are you going to do about it, YOLO? You're going to hang me? And they're like, no, we're going to cut your head off right here. And Duncan's like, what, bro? Because they're holding him down and getting ready to like cut his head off, and he's like yelling and trying to fight back. And then this guy shows up to save him, right? And this guy's another immortal. And then they go and they drink and they kind of like pass out from drinking so much. And then Duncan like wakes up later and the guy's about to cut off his head. And so then Duncan like moves out of the way at the last second. And he's like, what are you doing? You saved my life. He's like, yeah, it'd be a waste of the quickening if I let you die by those humans. So I got you drunk so I could kill you. And then, so this is why Duncan has some like feelings. I know, don't worry about it. It's like my kids in the car. So then they fight, and Duncan ends up beating him and taking care of that issue. Anyway, back to the present. He's like doing all this research. He's talking to like a priest in a nearby cathedral where all this incident happened. He finds out that there were like no bullet holes anywhere, that all the rounds were fired were blank. And then they go, like the kid gets like picked up, and kidnapped by the Order, but then they go rescue him, and it's like, it seems like he was gone for days, but all his wounds are like fresh, like his beat up wounds. And then kind of near the end, the guy's like, I failed, I couldn't convince Duncan, I convinced Richie, and then Horton's like, that's fine, that's what we want to divide them, so take this gun. And so then Duncan and Richie are watching him come, and he comes like by himself back to the barge to like take care of Duncan, right? Which is like what Duncan's trying to say is happening. But then the Order like rolls up and like shoots him, and so then Richie's like super pissed off because Duncan stopped him from like helping him or going to talk to him, because they had this whole conversation about leaving Paris, and it was just like a trick to try to like get them to come out themselves or whatnot. And so now Richie thinks Duncan is like full of it when Duncan was right, but then Duncan starts questioning it as well. And then at the end of like episode 21, which is the first of the 2-part episode, we see that the surgery turned this serial killer lady and like all this we keep getting like shots of her getting like trained to speak, and like this whole backstory about being French and all this stuff. And then when we finally see her revealed, it's dun dun dun. She looks exactly like Tessa. What? Some fan-freaking-tastic plastic surgery. Right. Obviously, it's the actress who plays Tessa, and she does a good job coming back and like playing somebody else. So she's pretty decent. I don't know, I've never seen her in anything else, but it was like, what? So then episode 2 picks up, and it's the funeral of this guy, and Richie's there, and then Duncan's kind of there in the background, and Richie's like, what are you doing here? Get out of here. And then he storms off, and then Duncan goes and talks, because Tessa's buried here, right? So he took her from like America and brought her back and buried her in her homeland, which is Paris. So he's having like conversation with her about like, did he do the right thing? Is he just like not human enough anymore? Has he forgotten what it's like to be human? All this kind of like sad stuff. And then he gets a glimpse of like this woman. So he kind of runs over, and then he doesn't find her because she disappears, and he's like very confused. And then Richie's like, what's wrong with you? And he's like, I don't know. And so we get some like back and forth with Richie and Duncan a little bit. And then Duncan, he was like talking to somebody. Was he talking to Horton? I don't think so. Anyway, so he's doing something. God, what was it? Anyway, he's doing something, and then he like walks out of this store or shop or whatever, and he sees the Tessa girl, or is that like some cafe or something? I can't remember exactly. So he like chases after her and like rescues her from being hit by a car, essentially. And then she's like, look, you seem like a nice guy, but I can't help you. I don't know what you want from me. And he's like, go on a date with me. And she's like, no. And right, but it's like it's a serial killer lady who looks just like Tessa. So he ends up sending her flowers, and then she like shows up at his barge, and is like, all right, I'll let you take me on that date. And then this whole time Richie's like thinking about what he said, and he's going to talk to like Joe, the Watcher, because he's around, about stuff that's going on. And then it kind of like comes out that like Horton's got to be alive, right? And they're like, that's impossible. Like, he got shot at point blank range, and like, he fell into the river. Like, how could he still be alive? And there's some back and forth about that, but eventually, like, all three of them come to that conclusion. Meanwhile, Duncan's like gobstruck by like this Tessa clone, because he never really got to say goodbye to Tessa. It wasn't like he was expecting to have like a long life, and then she just got murdered. So he's talking to this lady about her life and everything, and they're hanging out, and then they end up doing it, and good stuff. But then she wakes up the next morning and sees some like letters or whatever, or like the pictures of Tessa, and she like freaks out. And it's not like he was like, you remind me, you look just like somebody I used to know, right? And then even they see Richie right before the date, and Richie's like, what the heck? Like, he's like stunned as well. And she's like, I really do like someone you used to know. That's not just like a thing you said. And he's like, yeah, I told you. So then Richie starts like investigating this lady and like everything that's going on with that, and like Horton and like the organization, and working with Joe on that. While so she freaks out, obviously, but it's all an act. And then she like runs outside, and then she gets kidnapped by the Order, right? And so then Duncan decides that he needs to go rescue her from them. And so Richie's like, I'm coming too. So they like bust in there. No. That was before. So they had to rescue the kid. Oh, wait. Hold on. And one of the rescues, Richie comes along. I think it might have been this one, actually. But anyway, so what matters is that Duncan finally like rescues this girl, and then takes her, and then she like super mad at him still. So they storm. She runs off to like the graveyard where they first like met, quote unquote, where he like saw her, and then he's like, oh, here to see your dad's grave, because that was like the story. And she's like, no, I'm here to see Tessa's. And so she finds it, and then they get into, and then Duncan like calls her out on being like not the actual person, and like the surgery and like the story and how everything's like fake. And then she like laughs and like reveals everything to be true. And then Duncan like she's about to shoot him, and he's like, that gun is full of blanks. And she's like, what do you mean? And and I guess he like switched it out or something, and then he tells her that like, hey, Horton's just going to use you and kill you, like you don't want that, so let's work together. So they pretend that she shoots Duncan. So then Horton comes over to like cut off his head, and she's like, what are you doing? He's dead. Like, what are you doing with that sword or whatever? And he's like, oh, we'll see about that, something. And then Duncan like hops up and is like, ta-da! And her like freaks out and grabs the girl. He's like, you better let her go. And he's like, nope. And he like stabs her or shoots her. And then he's about to shoot Duncan. And then Joe shows up and he starts shooting. So they have like a shoot off in the graveyard, which is cool. And they're running around. And then Duncan like is slowly, like he's using his like Metal Gear Solid technique to like sneak up to Horton. And he gets to him, and Horton's like, aha, I got you now. And he fires the weapon, but it's out of bullets because I guess Duncan was tracking, right? He was counting in his head. And he's like, nope, I got you. And so he's like, Horton makes like a break for it, and then Duncan runs after it, and then Joe like pulls out a gun because he also got outside the graveyard where they were like fooling around. And he's like, all right, Horton, you're done. And then Duncan's like, no, I got it. Put your gun away. You don't have to kill your brother-in-law or whatever. And so Joe's like, okay, fair. And so then Horton makes a break for it. Duncan's like chasing him and like taunting him and talking about like, hey, you said you wanted to kill me and whatnot, and like, what are you gonna do? Like, you're gonna pussy out of it in the last second? Like, you want this? Let's do this. And so then Horton pulls out like a dagger, and then Duncan's like, you got one shot, go for it. And then Horton like goes to stab him, and Duncan obviously beats him, and then stabs him, and then like stands there and makes sure like he's dead for good this time. But then, then he goes back, and like they are kind of sad about the lady, and then Joe's like, I'll take care of all this. You guys get out of here, you scamps. And so then we get the wrap up where Richie and Duncan are like watching the barge that he sold off be driven away by some random old man. And they both got like their duffel bags with their swords, and it's like they chat a little bit, and then Duncan starts walking. He's like, so what are you going to do? It's like, I don't know. We're just going to be home. I don't know. And then Duncan picks up and is like, I guess I'll figure it out. And he starts walking, and then Richie's like just kind of stare at him, and he picks up his bag, and then Duncan's like, what are you doing? Come on. And Richie's like, yeah. So he's back. And so then they head out, and that wraps up season 2. And the Paris arc. We kind of roll back into New York with our homie, I already forgot his name. But in the beginning of season 3, but we get like kind of like a, I like to call it like a hot spring episode in like anime where it's just like some random stuff goes on. That's what it is. It's just we have like a random side story, and then we head back into like the next arc. But yeah, thanks for joining me on this season 2 adventure, and go ahead and like, share, subscribe, comment, and I will catch you guys later. Bye.